Okay. Ed Reedman, are you at home?
Yes.
Good evening, my friend.
Yes.
The Westbrook Planning Board is called to order on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021, at 7 p.m. in the Performing Arts Center at Westbrook Middle School, 471 Stroutwater Street, Westbrook. Roll call, please.
Robin Tannenbaum is absent. Nancy Littercapes.
Present.
Larry McWilliams.
Here.
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon.
Here.
Ed Reedman.
Here.
Ed Reedman.
Yes.
Chairman Rainey Daniels.
Present. Let the minutes show that we have a quorum of 5. Before we go on, I need to make an announcement. I want to welcome, not for her first time, but now as Ward 3 Representative Nancy Lithroscape. Welcome aboard. We will be skipping the approval of minutes, and we'll go right to the regular business. And Becca, would you be good enough to read it into the minutes?
Item 2020.37, Site Plan Subdivision Conditional Use, 364 Spring Street, Flagship Spring Street LLC. The applicant is proposing a 22-unit subdivision, associated parking and site improvements, tax map 008, lot 008, zone residential growth area 1, use dwelling 2-family and dwelling multiple family.
Thank you, Becca. And the applicant presenting is Dustin Roma. Welcome, Dustin.
Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, planning board members. My name is Dustin Roma, civil engineer with DM Roma Consulting Engineers. I'm here tonight representing Flagship Spring Street LLC. So the project you have in front of you here, located at 364 Spring Street, proposed 22-unit residential apartment project. Currently, the site has an existing 2-unit residential building on it. It has an existing kind of a large barn garage facility that was previously used by the Twin Falls Golf Course, proposed to be renovated into a 4-unit building, and we've got 8 additional duplex buildings proposed further into the site. Some of the items that we've worked on and modified since we were last in front of the board is around the architecture of the buildings. The feedback we received from the board was that they preferred the kind of stepped look to the buildings instead of the single square look. So what we did is we had previously had those proposed just for the 3-bedroom units. We modified our design for the 2-bedrooms so that all the buildings on the site will be more coordinated. We also have some architectural elements in that the upper gable ends of the buildings will be a vinyl board and batten type of exterior facade. We'll have a strip below that separating the clapboards from the board and batten finish, and then the traditional type of vinyl clapboard siding below that roof line. And each of the buildings will have a front porch entry area, kind of creating a focal point for that entrance, and then decks on the backs of the buildings. So we did make those updates. We also received a fair amount of correspondence from the Miles Lane neighborhood. They just had some concerns about the buffering in between the backyards of their dwelling units and ours. And what we've done is propose some kind of some dense screening along that property line there. There's a stand of significant larger trees, which provide the higher screening components, but it did have a lack of that lower canopy material. So we did include and Abervite Row along that rear side. The main focal point that we heard from that neighborhood was their main concern was just vehicles turning into these new parking spaces, both in the shared parking space in the back and also the common parking areas between the buildings, is that as vehicles were turning in that low canopy area, you could have headlights shining into the backyards of these adjacent buildings. So certainly that denser landscaping screening we felt was most appropriate. So we worked with the neighbors on that and have included that in the plans. We've also worked with the city on the development of plans for the off-site sidewalks. We've proposed them to extend in a southerly direction so that the sidewalk would end opposite of the Jacqueline Way, and we're proposing a crosswalk in that location with the flashing beacons that'll be installed, similar to what's up the street at Landing Road. So we'll be installing those improvements as part of our project. Also including an extension of the sidewalk in a northerly direction up to the Miles Lane driveway, even though we don't necessarily expect, our residents to walk up that way, but it's a nice connection point, something that the, again, we heard during the review comments that city felt would be a benefit, so we have extended the sidewalk in a northerly direction up to that road to provide a further connection point. Other than that, the project is essentially similar to what the board saw at our last meeting. We're excited to get started and certainly happy to answer any questions that the board may have here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Staff comments?
Just to just make a statement before we get into the rest of the meeting. In order for people to be able to hear us very clearly, we need to make sure that we have microphones very close to our face, as well as if you are in the public, make sure that you are in close proximity to the microphone so we can make sure that we pick you up on our video and audio. As far as the application before us right now, we have a few items, as Dustin had mentioned, that we're going to be working on in coordination with additional potential projects in the vicinity so that we can make sure we have a coordinated effort on the sidewalk system. So we have included as a condition of the approval that the applicant will continue to work with the city staff, and prior to commencement of the project, that the sidewalk system will either go in the direction as it's shown on the plan, or we will make the connection up to Landing Road. So the intent of what we're trying to do is get these residents to a connection point that they can then cross Spring Street and afford that amenity that people are going to want to utilize from the neighborhood to come into the city. So either we need to make the connection to Jacqueline, or we're going to be making the connection up to Landing to make sure that pedestrians in this neighborhood have a way of which to cross Spring Street safely. So that will come out of the process afterwards. We have provided you a motion, findings of facts, conclusions, and conditions on pages 2 through 8 of the staff memo, if the board finds that the application is sufficient to be able to move forward.
Thank you, Jenny. Before I open the public comment section, I want to remind you that the microphone system that I want you to use is to my left, but to your right. And make sure you say your name and your address, and state the questions clearly, and state the comments clearly. And to repeat what Jen said, make sure you're close to the mic so people can hear you, not only here, but at home. This public comment section is open. Who wants to be the brave one?
Evening. My name's Dan Blaze. I am at 39 Miles Lane in Westbrook. Actually, one of the neighbors that Dustin mentioned. I'm curious, Dustin, you did mention that the driveways were of concern, but looking at the plans, it seems like you've only addressed a small portion of the parking and driveway areas. I'm curious why that might be. It's a very limited area where you're putting those trees along the property line, so I was curious what you guys were thinking about there.
I will ask him the question once you're over, at the end.
Okay. I guess that's really all I had. I'm really hoping that we can get this figured out. We've been communicating, but there has been there was an understanding of myself and the neighbors that we were going to get a little bit more of a back and forth. There was mention of fencing, partial fencing, along with shrubberies, but it seems that that's not the case according to the plan. If the board is looking to move this forward, I'd ask that maybe we have some sort of stipulation where we can come back if there is some issues with the headlights in our homes as this property gets developed. I know, I'm sorry, I forget the other gentleman's name. In his email, he mentioned that they would work with us after they started to do a little bit more, but that's concerning if they get past the planning board here and get approvals, what we might have to actually hold them accountable for that. That's all.
Thank you, Daniel. Someone else? Seeing no one, I close the public comment section. I really have only seen one question asked, and that is about the driveways and the headlights.
Sure. So again, we focused on the kind of the larger parking lot area, and then also the parking area that's in between essentially units 10 and 11. Looking at the properties that were in the backyards of those buildings and just looking at how a vehicle would come in and turn into those spaces, we've attempted to kind of cover the breadth of what we felt would be the area where, you know, headlights could be turning in, coming in through there. We had some landscaping proposed previously, a little bit closer to the Spring Street side, but the city felt that they really needed to keep that easement open, the sewer easement that runs through there, and not be planting trees in there. So in working through the process, we actually had removed some of the proposed landscaping in those areas, but that was really one of the kind of the bigger lots. It's right next to the pump station area that's there. And it was just, there's basically one driveway area in between those first two buildings that would be kind of going in that direction anyway. So again, we removed that vegetation at the request of the city. I think that the request all along has been for a fence. I think, you know, there's, you know, some people that like fences, some people prefer the vegetation route. We chose to go the vegetation route in this circumstance, given the substantial amount of large trees that are already in through there and how disruptive we felt it would be to install a fence. We thought the addition of the understory evergreen plantings to fill in those gaps would be more appropriate. So I think, you know, as we, you know, we want to be good neighbors. Again, as we build this project out, we wanted to put what we thought was a good appropriate amount of landscaping on the plan that gets approved. If there's areas where we can come in and infill, I mean, we want privacy for our residents as well. So if there's kind of areas of gaps and things like that, that we feel would be mutually beneficial between both neighborhoods, we would be looking to kind of fill those areas in on our own as well.
Becca and Jen, did you see any other questions that I did not bring up?
Nope, I think it was just trying to clarify again what the plan right now is as far as it is at this point, vegetation. We did hear from the abutter that they would like a fence and vegetation, but I think that it's up now more of a board discussion at this point on making those decisions.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Board comments and discussion. Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dustin, thank you too for making the improvements that we did ask for as far as the building looks, the modifications. I think it's definitely going to be an improvement to where we started at when we first started coming, and especially the sidewalks. Thanks for accommodating those as well. I know it was a big expense. You guys weren't looking to do full both ways, but we appreciate that. And I think it's good for having our pedestrians being safe, crosswalk, the whole 9 yards, for people to get access to and from both neighborhoods, or all three neighborhoods, because we're going to have another one down the road as well. So I think it's a good idea with having the plan. The one thing with the landscaping and the fencing, I understand with the easement, it would definitely be something that I would recommend as well. I know you say you're willing to work with the neighbors and as well, but if we had some kind of condition noting that, yes, if there was an issue, that we could either put more plantings in or possible fence. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other board member?
I echo what Larry just said about a condition for more vegetation if that's needed. I think that's a great idea.
Madam Vice Chair?
I have a question through you, Mr. Chaff, to Mr. Chair, to staff. So what's the reasoning behind not wanting vegetation in the easement? Is it just a maintenance issue for the city? Is it?
So that corridor is meant to facilitate sewer for the larger Twin Falls project in the future. So to put vegetation too close to sewer lines is potentially an issue from a long-term maintenance standpoint, because the root systems will go out and eventually they'll grow into the piping system. So that is where, within that easement area, that eventually the intent is for that to be a public easement that would run through the parcel and would provide public sewer to the adjacent parcel and into the Miles Lane area.
Would a fence be a better solution? And it's hard to tell. I can't tell what's on the other side of that easement on that development side.
I can pull that up. I'll just turn this off while I get to it.
Anything else? Madam Vice Chair?
I guess, I think we need to look at something in that easement and creating buffering, and I echo what the other two board members have said about getting more buffering in place now, because otherwise it's not going to be any guarantee to the neighbors that that will happen during construction.
Thank you. Mr. Reedman, do you have any comments? Mr. Reedman, do you have any comments?
Yeah. My question is, Are these going to be rental units or for sale?
Mr. Roma?
Yep, yeah, their intent is to be rental units. That's what we're proposing.
Anything else, Mr. Reedman? Anything else, Mr. Reedman? Anything else, Mr. Reedman?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reedman. Can you refresh my memory, Mr. Roma, regarding the landscaping? Just the big items, like trees and large shrubberies. How many of those, and where are they to be placed?
Are we talking about just along the rear yard of the Miles Lane properties? Or?
Between your property and the property already constructed?
Right. So we've got 12 of the green arborvitae trees that we're proposing to plant in pretty much a continuous row to act as a fence along the property lines. And these were what was communicated to me were that these were the neighbors that were the most concerned about it, were on these two properties where we've placed these trees. The homeowner that's immediately adjacent to the pump station, I don't know that they expressed that same concern. So what we, again, tried to focus in on the areas where, you know, folks had come in and express individual concern for these buffer areas. So we've got a dozen trees. And again, we're not proposing to cut any of the existing trees that are there. We've located our buildings. We've pulled them away from the property line to give some backyard space in between the properties so that it would be basically a similar distance off the property line from what the properties are on the other side. And then again, filling in those gaps. And we're showing those 12 arborvitaes in a straight line across, basically in front of those existing trees that are there now. And I mean, we can certainly spread those out. I mean, we can add a few more to extend that row further down as we need to. Right from the get-go, we've talked quite a bit. It's been brought up about a fence. We're really trying to come up with some other vegetative type of alternative to just a fence that's going to require a lot of maintenance. You know, the vegetative buffer areas are just more natural. I think over time they look better as opposed to a fence that just looks worse over time. And, you know, these vegetative areas can, you know, be supplemented and added to. I think it'll be a nice improvement for the area. So, again, you know, for the record, we're agreeable to working with the neighbors here and, you know, filling in some gaps here and there with some landscaping. You know, a few more arborvitae trees would be fine with us if that's, you know, what it takes to basically get it through to the easement line. The easement to the sewer district, you know, it's only 30 feet wide, so there's not a lot of room there per se to do much landscaping. I think that's why the city had requested us to remove it in that narrow easement. And it's not just the location of a pipe, you know, if they have, you know, it's the installation of the pipe, if they have to maintain it in the future. It's all of that goes into keeping that easement somewhat open is kind of what was communicated to us. So
What size of the vegetation are you talking about?
So those trees are 6 feet tall when you plant them. And then above that, again, there's larger canopy trees that exist there, pretty large diameter, continuously through that property. So it's really that lower understory that needs some help in providing some of that screening.
Does the terrain go upwards or stay the same in that area?
It stays fairly flat through there. It's almost flat across the property line. It doesn't go up in one direction or the other. It stays fairly flat.
Are the homes single floor, not yours, but the others, are they single floor or double?
My recollection is that the homes in this area are like Cape and Colonial style two-story homes. There are some ranches down further in, but these ones here are two-story homes, I believe.
Thank you, Justin. Staff, any comments? None? Okay. Remember on page 2 is the suggested motion, and if you concur that there needs to be additional shrubberies, make sure that's included in your motion, so it'll be on record. Who would like to make a motion? Move this forward. Madam Vice Chair?
I have a question first. What's the best way to include language? Do we want to include a quantity?
Typically, we have just our number of trees that we show on a plan so that so it's a very objective inspection process versus saying what is technically a gap or what is not a gap. If there was areas outside of those limits, again, we are very hesitant about putting anything within the sewer easement. The applicant did have to move things out of that area that they themselves wanted to put in there, which was transformers or other elements to the project, which we had advised them that they needed to remove those as well. But if the board wanted to put in a certain quantity, that at least gives us a number, so that we can ensure that that quantity is installed. Or if there was a specified gap clearance, but we just don't want to leave this completely subjective after the fact, because that's when frustration occurs, and we don't want people to be frustrated at the end of a process.
Also, if I could just add, I think what might not have been initially clear to Mr. Blaze also is that these areas here and on this side have existing vegetation that are shown on the plan. So although it appears that the vegetation is ending at that location, it does extend down. And I don't know if that was noted upon initial review.
Yeah, I mean, I understand there's existing vegetation there, but there's not existing headlights pulling into those spaces right now either, so. I mean, it looks like there's 13 trees.
Dustin, how many trees?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that length of shrub, buffer that we have there, I mean, that's 12 trees there now. So if we added another 6, I mean, you basically would be making that 50% longer than what we're already showing it now, and we could certainly add a little bit of that to each end just to lengthen it out. So, we could add another 6 shrubs to that, and it would be 50% bigger than what it is now, and just extend it along that line. Then that would be, we could go from 12 to 18, and then that would be a number, we can just add that to this plan. Certainly willing to do that. I think more than that would be getting into the easement areas and also getting into where the stormwater pond areas are, and it'd be, get into difficulty in planting those areas or obstructing the easements, but we could add another 6 trees there.
Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dustin, how about if we, right where the parking lots are pulling in, rather than even on that buffer, could we plant something in the backs of the driveways, so when the cars are pulling in, possibly, whether it be grasses or other kinds of landscape, maybe not have to be all the way on the border, but closer to the driveways, it might be a solution to break up the headlights.
Yep, we had certainly considered that initially, and then one of the things that we were a little concerned about is just where that's generally the spot where we plow the snow, and just the thoughts of having, we could do grasses or something like that there that would grow a little bit taller. I don't know that they'd block the headlights, so they'd have to be really tall. It's definitely a balance between trying to get some decent, open, usable green space lawn areas behind these units that people will actually go out and use for recreation, and filling it all up with landscaping so that it blocks views and things like that. That's why we decided we did some street trees immediately behind the parking lot areas that would kind of grow up into some bigger canopies. But as far as the denser vegetation, we chose to show that along the rear property line, which would just give more beneficial lawn space in and around the units, rather than clogging it up with a lot of landscaping beds and mounds and things like that. I think it would have the same effect whether it's at the property line or whether it's immediately behind the parking lot areas, and it wouldn't have the detriment of being damaged by snow piles and things like that.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair?
If everyone's okay with that, I don't mind making the motion with adding
6 trees?
But I just had one more question on the motion. I was just noticing that we have a plus or minus in front of the 22 unit. Wouldn't it?
That would be an error. It's just 22 units.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the site plan subdivision and conditional use application for Flagship Spring Street LLC for a 22-unit subdivision located at 363 Spring Street, tax map 008, lot 008, zone residential growth area 1, is approved with conditions in the following finding of fact, conclusions, and conditions as stated on pages 2 through 8 of the staff memo dated April 30th, 2021, are adopted in support of that approval, with the additional condition of adding 6 more trees to the property line for buffering.
Motion moved by Madam Vice Chair. I need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Nancy. Any comments? I don't believe I asked Ed. Ed Raymond, do you have any? I asked Ed Raymond.
No.
Thank you. Anyone else that has discussion? If not, we'll take a roll call vote.
Yes.
Larry McWilliams,
Yes?
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon,
Yes.
Ed Reedman,
Yes.
Ed Reed,
Yes.
Chair Rainey Daniel.
Yes. Let the record show that it was unanimous. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you all.
Becca, would you be good enough to read the next item?
Item 2021.05, site plan to Shabbat Street, Camp Commercial Real Estate LLC. The applicant is proposing a new 17,800 square foot commercial truck service facility affiliated with the existing automobile dealership Row Ford located at the intersection of Larrabee Road and Main Street. Tax map 047, lot 201, zone Gateway Commercial District, use automobile repair service.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Eric Sowry from Altus Engineering in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, here on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, let's go through here. What's the best direction to point this in, Becca?
It doesn't always work from the podium. I may have to control it up here
Okay,
for you.
Go for it then.
All right.
All right, one more, please. All right, here we are, 2 Shabbat Street. Right in here, you can see this is Larrabee. In here, this is the existing Row Ford dealership down on the bottom. The site was built in 1998 as part of an industrial park. It currently hosts a 30,000 square foot building. Most recently, it was used as a medical office building and is now vacant. The site is also almost 100% impervious. It's got a large parking lot, as well as a small stormwater pond in the back. Next slide, please. This is just a zoomed up view showing some of the utilities and the stormwater pond in the lower right-hand corner there. One more slide. Existing additions basically tell you the same story as the aerial, so we can skip past that. Demo plan. This is basically telling you that everything on site is going to be removed. We're removing all the pavement, removing the building, doing some work on the utilities and the stormwater to make way for this, the slide you see here now. The building is 17,797 square feet of footprint. It has 12 internal bays, 2 of which are drive-through bays on the end. Yeah, right there, good. And we've got 103 parking spaces, the majority of which, 75% of them, are for trucks. These are 10 by 25 spaces. What they're doing here is the repair of anything from a truck with a ladder rack all the way up to a single unit box truck, maybe a cherry picker. Every now and again they'll get a motorhome or even a tractor trailer. They currently do this work at the Row Ford site at the corner of Main Street and Larrabee Road. It's since outgrown. The facility there and now wasn't specially built for this purpose, so they're going to construct a brand new facility and move that operation to this site. We do have some car parking spaces on there. That's mostly for staff. But up front here, we do have space for people to drop off vehicles. Usually be a two vehicle operation where we have one person in the car, the other guy with his truck, and they'll get in and drive off in the car. We also have in the upper corner here, we have 3 dumpsters. One is recycling, 1 trash, and 1 for metal. That's in a full fenced-in enclosure. And we have 2 driveways from Shabbat Street. The main entrance is down here, and this one up in here, which kind of has a funny shape. We did that to avoid a large utility pole there that's got everything coming off of it, with underground utilities going in every direction, including across the street. That has the added benefit of forcing truck traffic to go back towards Larrabee versus down through Shabbat, now towards the center of town. We do need a waiver for parking. An automotive use needs, I think it's 1.5 per 1,000 square feet. If I'm 1.5 spaces per 100 square feet, we would need 267 spaces. That's mostly for display purposes that you'd have at a dealership where we're not selling cars at this location. So we did ask for a waiver. Next slide, please.
It's moving a little slow tonight.
Okay. All right, this is the grading and drainage plan. This site was a little complicated. We had originally proposed a few rain gardens and a small underground detention system. Since then, with our initial conversation with DEP, we found out the initial building, the original building that's on site now, never got its DEP permit. So instead of a redevelopment, I don't know how it happened. I know you're looking at me, Mr. Chair, but I have no idea how it happened. It probably shouldn't have, but they got the building permit and they built the building without their DEP permit. That left the applicant in a position of having to treat 95% of the runoff versus 60%. So to do that, we expanded the underground systems, which are these long rows of chambers here, which they're comprised of storm check chambers. It's a hard plastic chamber over a sand filter, which provides filtration of the runoff before it discharges into the existing pond. We've also got 2 grassed under-drain soil filters in these locations here. Similar to a rain garden, they act in the same manner. All told, we do capture and treat 95.1% of the runoff from the entire site, which is a vast improvement over what's going on the site now. Next slide, please, Becca. We can skip past that one. It's just erosion control, full perimeter controls, and erosion control blankets as usual. That's something you'd expect on a site like this. Utilities. Utilities are all there. We do have potable water, fire service line. There is gas, electric, and obviously sewer. Everything's coming in here. We've got water coming in the top, electric's coming in here. The only interesting thing about this is the sewer line. We do have floor drains inside the bays. That's to capture any water that's coming off a vehicle that you drive into. Every now and again, maybe once a month, they'll wash a car down. That has to go to an oil water separator that we have in this location here before discharging into the sanitary system. The sanitary system, unfortunately, is too high in Shabbat Street to match the finished floor here, so I didn't have enough cover. So we do have a small force main and a small pump station out in the front of the building right in here that will direct a force main, a pressure system right here to tie into the existing gravity line in this location here. That's it on utilities. Next slide. Lighting. Lighting is all low energy LED fixtures, full cutoff, downcast, dark sky compliant. That minimizes light trespass going over the property line. It's what you'd expect to see on a site like this. And that's it in a nutshell. Becca, can you advance to the, landscaping, the most important part. There's not a lot of room for landscaping on this site, as you know. It's not a lot of green space there now, and what's left over is being taken up by stormwater. But we were able to do a lot of work on the frontage here, which includes saving the majority of the trees that are there now that we're complementing with some shrubberies and some flower beds, as well as down here on the bottom. There's also a little bit of extra screening for the existing transformer pad up top. In conjunction with the waiver request for the parking, we looked at off-site landscaping. This slide here is at the corner of Main Street and Larrabee, directly across from Roe Ford. This is an area where DEP recently came in and they got rid of a little slip lane here and created this whole chunk of open green space. So what we've decided to do is do a whole bunch of landscaping in that area there and sort of do a nice little betterment at a main intersection in town. I think it's going to look really nice. All right, Becca, can you find the building elevations? I don't think you guys want to talk about details, so we'll skip past those. They're going to be towards the end. Oh, okay, pump station. Is that the end, Becca? Oh, okay, in that case I was wrong. It's going to be right after that last landscaping slide, then. I think I took them out of order for some reason. 14 and 15, yeah. 14's let's go with 14 real quick. Okay, this is the floor plan. This bottom side here is Shabbat Street. Larrabee's on this side. This is the main entrance in here. You got all the office work and things that happen inside the truck repair service with the bays in the back. You've got 10 bays in here, and these are the 2 drive-through on the top end here. There's also a mezzanine for parts storage. One more slide down, and I think that's it. These are the building elevations, standard Ford colors. You've got the Ford badging, the Ford gray, all the finishes. Looks very similar to Roe Ford down the road there. There were 5 staff comments in the packet that I'll go through real quick. The first one is the applicant is in the process of DEP review. We have submitted for a stormwater permit. That was a condition of approval. I recently learned they're having major staffing issues at DEP, including losing 2 main people. So that could be a problem with this. I asked them, is that going to affect the permitting timeline? They said, no problem at all. So I bit my tongue. I didn't say anything. So hopefully that will come true. So wishful thinking, keep your fingers crossed. The second is for landscaping at Maine and Larrabee. Proposed limits of mulch, where grass growth in this area is difficult to maintain, suggest island be mulched up to the sidewalk. I talked to my landscape architect about that, and she said that because there's a sidewalk in that location separating the road from the bed or the flower bed there, that grass is going to have a good chance of surviving there. It's not going to be covered in salt and sand and things like that. So my suggestion on that is just because Ford has to maintain this area, if it does become an issue, we've got dead grass growing everywhere, that's at that point we'd replace it with mulch. But in the meantime, I think grass is going to look better. The third is the waiver requests, which we've already gone over. Number 4, if reusing the sewer connection, they want us to televise the sewer before we connect to it. There is a note on the utility plan to that effect. That's just to make sure that the existing line is suitable for reuse. And the last one is landscaping in lieu of the fee for having less than the minimal green space, which is the off-site landscaping that we've talked about. At that point, I'll turn it over to you guys. Any questions?
Thank you, Eric. Staff comments?
I believe Eric did a great job in his presentation. The waiver provision for the parking is incorporated into the motion that is before you. Staff support that motion, where that the allocation of parking would be excessive in this particular instance, and to reduce parking is a good thing. We are very excited about the utilization of the landscaping that is going to be done on Main Street, to incorporate the landscaping requirement in the Gateway Commercial District, to continue the theme that we are trying to achieve down Main Street with beautification. And just to, one last comment is the improvements of stormwater on this site are substantive, and this project will most certainly help the stormwater quality in this watershed. With that, there is a motion on page 9, along with the conditions, findings of fact, and conclusions on pages 9 through 12 for your consideration.
Thank you, Jen. Again, I want to remind everyone that the microphone that you use, if you want to come up and make a comment or a statement, is the one to my left or to your right. Make sure you speak into the microphone slowly and clearly, so the people at home, our number one fans, and those who are here can hear you. I officially open this public hearing. Who would like to be the first? I now officially close this public hearing. Since there was no questions, Eric, you don't need to give me any answers.
I don't have a problem with that.
Board comments and discussion. Seeing none, we'll move along. As again, I'm going to say, make sure that you read the motion, the suggested motion on page 9, and I need to move this forward, so who would be the brave one to make the motion? Nancy?
Mr. Chair, I motion that the site plan application for Camp Commercial Real Estate LLC for a 17,800 square foot commercial truck service facility located at 2 Shabbat Street, tax map 047, lot 201, zone Gateway Commercial District, including a waiver of 335-13.6.B1 to reduce on-site parking to 103 parking spaces, and acceptance of the landscape plan shown on sheet L2 to meet the landscape requirement of the Gateway Commercial District is approved with conditions, and the following findings of fact, conclusions, and conditions as stated on page 9 through 12 of the staff memo dated April 30th, 2021 are adopted in support of that approval.
Thank you, Nancy. Motion moved by Nancy Litherscape. I need a second, please.
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
Seconded by Larry. It's been moved and seconded. Any comments? Ed, do you have any comments?
Any comments?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Just one question, and I should have asked it earlier, but Jen was right, and your presentation was excellent. On the little garden that you're going to do at the four corners, Main Street and Larrabee Road, is there going to be an acknowledgement sign there?
There's the potential for that, yeah, and I think it would be a small plaque saying, maintained by Row Ford. Nothing major, not an advertisement, so to speak. But we have not put that in the plan, but we would like to do so if possible.
And I would also be in favor of that. If no more comments, roll call vote, Madam Secretary.
I have a promotion.
I know, isn't that fabulous?
Nancy Littricapes,
Yes.
Larry McWilliams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon,
Yes.
Ed Reedman,
Yes.
Yes.
Chair Rainey Daniel.
With great pleasure, yes.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate your time.
Becca, would you be good enough to read the next motion?
Item
No, excuse me, the next item?
Item 2020.20, Site Plan Amendment, Shoreland Overlay Zone, 5 Bradley Drive, Abbott Diagnostics. The applicant is proposing an amendment to their August 4th, 2020 approved site plan to modify the northerly site entrance and construct a plus or minus 150 space parking lot within the footprint of the previously approved building expansion. Tax map 005B, lot 034, Zone Manufacturing District, Shoreland Overlay Zone, General Development, and Resource Protection. Use light manufacturing.
Applicant presentation, Jeff Aceto.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Aceto. I'm a licensed civil engineer in the state of Maine, employed by SMRT Architects and Engineers of Portland, representing Abbott Diagnostics for the site improvement site improvements for 5 Bradley site plan amendment. I think folks might remember in recent history the pandemic and the National Defense Act and many other things from last summer. Abbott Diagnostics last summer moved heaven and earth to take a lease on this property at 5 Bradley and begin producing COVID test kits. And pretty much renovated the building top to bottom and changed the property entirely. So several hundred good paying jobs to the city of Westbrook. You may recall this layout. This was the old Olympia manufacturing building. The site layout was approved before, part of a new parking lot back in the area over here for employees, some new circulation drives, a elevator and stair here to support the manufacturing side, and a future 46,000 square foot building addition here on the end of the manufacturing building. What you don't see is multiple lines of manufacturing here, all producing product going out to the loading dock over there. One other thing I want to show you right now in this layout was a existing driveway, a legacy condition to number 58 Pershing Way, which came down like this and met up to this new driveway in that area. Slide, please. This is our application tonight. Due to changing conditions with responding to the COVID situation, Abbott has identified that the building addition is not necessary at this time. And they feel they can better accommodate their staff by using that area for parking. The layout that you see here is where there was a proposed building addition before, has replaced with about 136 parking spaces to accommodate staff. I'd also like to point out a layout the city asked us to consider, given the short amount of time that we had to coordinate last year in getting this application through, that something be done to the 58 Pershing Way Drive to separate it fully from the activities on the Lot 34 for Abbott. What you see there is a removal of that previous driveway right here. It's now grassed with a new gravel drive coming down and connecting to Pershing Way with some improvements there. And I'll explain that in a moment. Slide, please. Briefly, here's the overall site plan. The application really winds down to four areas. The parking lot itself, the modifications to the driveway at Pershing Way, a modification to the stormwater pond right here, and some landscape area up here by the front flagpoles. Slide, please. This is the layout plan. Very briefly, you can see the parking lot a little more in detail. Slide, please. This is the Pershing Way improvements more in detail. This is pavement to improve the roadway itself with a paved apron and a gravel driveway coming up to connect to the existing one. And this is the previous alignment that will be removed and grassed. Slide, please. This is the grading plan. In general, the parking lot is going to come down in this direction, gets drained down here by 2 catch basins, collected and sent to that stormwater pond, and that will be treated there at DEP Chapter 500 standards. The modifications of the pond are limited to expanding that infiltration trench. That's how the pond actually discharges. We had to add some length onto that for the additional flow, but the existing pond will work very well in this role. Slide, please. This is a landscaping plan. Abbott has taken effort. This is their logo right here in a special landscaped area that they want to hide. That's the front entrance. That's the visitor entrance. They want to create a better environment there. We've also added some trees over here in the grassed island, so we didn't leave that behind as well. Slide, please. This is the building rendering of what the building looks like now and what it will look like after approval. The facade would have been a building addition here. This is where that parking lot is now. And same, this is the south facade with the loading dock. The building addition was going to be here, and now that will be a parking lot. This is just for record as to what the building looks like today and will look like afterwards. Slide, please. Want to remind the board that Abbott has already done substantial improvements to Pershing Way from here up to here as part of that previous approval. Slide, please. And just in general, traffic was accommodated by the previous improvements that were approved for a temporary traffic movement permit for ADEX were adequate for the additional trips created by putting Abbott on the site. Through a lot of coordination with the city, the DOT, with IDEX, and Abbott, Abbott was able to engage and commit to being part of that traffic permit. I think you folks are aware that we're working right now over here on Spring Street in this intersection. These improvements have been funded largely by IDEX. The intersection of Saco and Eisenhower will be the responsibility of Abbott to some degree with others profit sharing, not profit sharing, revenue sharing. And those improvements will be targeted to be completed in summer of 2022. Design has begun. We're anticipating that we'll have a contractor on board by September and start those improvements this year. And again, with a target completion by summer 22. That's the requirement for the TMP. Slide, please. In short, that's a brief overview of the changes to the site. Largely, it's the removal of the building from the approval and allowing them to add some parking in there for the folks on site. Joining us this evening is Andy Wilkinson, Site Director from Abbott Diagnostics, and also Craig Piper, Principal Architect with SMRT Architects and Engineers. We're ready to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Jeff. Staff comments? Jen, please.
I believe that the presentation provided most of the updates on the comments. We find that the elements that are being added into the Pershing Way upgrades, the separation of driveways, the work to be done for Spring Street, Saco Street intersection that will help actually facilitate traffic through this area will be huge improvements that this project is participating in and are needed for the area. The applicant has a number of conditions that they will need to address prior to groundbreaking, but we have listed those out for them and have provided the board with a motion on page 16. And if the board finds that the application is ready to approve, they have the motion ready to go.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to open the public hearing. And again, before I do, please come down and use the microphone system on the left to me, but on the right for you. Public hearing opened.
Hi, my name is Gary Verrill. I own Nature's Design Landscaping. I own the driveway that they want to change. We were there first. The driveway was already in place. and they want to remove our driveway and make it more difficult to turn with trucks and trailers. So I have an issue with that. Also, Pershing Way isn't a big enough road to accommodate. They've already added 250 parking spaces. Now they want to add another 130, I believe. I think it's going to be too much traffic coming out Pershing Way. As it is, when IDEX is open, you have a hard time pulling out of Pershing and taking a left. Even with that traffic light, we're adding all those new spaces from IDEX and now all this. I think it's just too much. What I propose is they take that road that they've got coming down to Pershing Way and they exit it out onto Bradley Drive. I actually made improvements to Pershing Way as much as they have and put a hammerhead turnaround in and a street light, which is supposed to all go away. So I just wanted to address those issues.
Thank you. Anyone else? I close the public hearing. Jeff, could you address the street going to grass?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Again, with our application, the conversation was made with city staff that there was concern there that maybe there's a better way, a better geometry. With the higher intensity use of that driveway, with adding the parking spaces, that's valid. So separating out a separate service or drive for lot number 58 was considered an improvement in many ways. Another point to make is that we did coordinate with Mr. Verrill many times in the last summer. We tried at length to work to come up with a mutual drive, and we were unable to find an agreement in that situation. So we've worked with the city for this solution to separate that out. There's an existing access easement of 60 feet there. That's also where the CMP lines are. That driveway is in that easement. This is all consistent with the lawful access across lot 34 from number 58.
Okay. And the second question is traffic.
There are traffic comments in your packets, responses from Tom Erico from TY Lin, who's our traffic engineer. We have studied the trips on Pershing Way and studied the intersection of Eisenhower and Pershing Way. There is no warrant for a signal to be added there. It doesn't improve that. There's also no advantage to putting turning lanes in. That was also analyzed. Pershing Way is a private right-of-way that services multiple property owners, including Abbott, and the road has had substantial improvements thanks to Abbott, and again, we'll have additional improvements. Mr. Verrill's gate and light will be relocated to the end of Pershing Way. The city's gate will be as well to accommodate that. So in the end, there'll be a more improved entrance into to lot number 58 Pershing Way, and we feel it's an improvement for everyone.
Thank you. Jen, do you want to respond?
So there were some questions raised related to traffic specific to the Pershing Way vicinity, turning movements. The applicant has agreed to have the area monitored once that the site is up and running, and have the traffic engineer come back and do a monitoring study of some of the maneuvers around Pershing Way to ensure that what we have moving forward is in compliance with traffic regulations. So right now, based upon current conditions, we know that COVID has definitely suppressed traffic. We know that it's not the exact numbers that otherwise it would normally be. So the applicant has recognized that and has agreed to come back and look at these areas of concern that the city did raise to them to look at the future.
Thank you, Jen. Board comments? Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, it's not as the gentleman was saying with his business in the front, is his driveway up in the top part where that circle is, as far as trucks? What kind of trucks are actually driving out on Pershing to cut off where that new roadway is existing? Is it big trucks? Is it just cars?
Into Mr. Barrow's property?
Yes.
I've assessed what Mr. Barrow drives for a vehicle, and I've provided for a fillet. Oop, lost the laser pointer. I've applied for the correct geometry here for a vehicle that size, a 2-unit trailer with a vehicle of this size coming in and out of there. The movements are appropriate.
The public hearing is over, sir.
So I can't have any more say in it?
That's correct. Anyone else on the board has something to ask? If not, we'll move to the motion. Oh, wait a minute. Were those the only two questions? I'm sorry, I bypassed you. Were there any additional questions?
The ones that we caught were the traffic, the concern raised about the separation of the driveways, which we do feel provides for a better condition and not having two driveways being merged together. And the other item was the movement of the current streetlight that is at the entrance point of the existing driveway that will be moved down to be at the end of the road, which would then facilitate lighting for both the 58 Pershing property as well as showing the end of the road where the gate is.
Okay, thank you. The motion is on page 14 or 16, and I need the motion so we can move this item. Madam Vice Chair?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that the planning board approve Abbott Diagnostics application for site plan amendment and shoreland overlay zone to modify the northerly site entrance and construct a plus or minus 150 space parking lot within the footprint of the previously approved building expansion located at 5 Bradley Drive, tax map 005B, lot 034, zone manufacturing district overlay shoreland zone, is approved with conditions and the following findings of fact, conclusions, and conditions as stated on pages 14 through 17 of this staff memo dated April 30th, 2021 are adopted in support of that approval.
Thank you. I need a second.
A second.
Seconded by Nancy, moved by Madam Vice Chair, and seconded by Nancy. Any comments? Ed, do you have any comments? Ed, do you have any comments?
No, I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Reardon. If there's no comments, roll call vote.
Nancy Litter-Capes,
Yes.
Larry McWilliams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon,
Yes.
Ed Reedman,
Yes.
Ed Reedman,
Yes.
Chair Rainey Daniel.
Yes. Let the record show that it was unanimous.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Becca, would you be good enough to read the next item?
Item 2021.13, Site Plan, 39 Warren Ave, Warren Mechanical. The applicant is proposing a new plus or minus 8,600 square foot office and warehouse building with associated parking and site improvements. Tax map 046, lots 009, 010, and 010A. Zone Industrial Park District, use warehousing, business office.
Application presentation by David Latham and Eric Doobie.
Good evening. I'm Eric Doobie with Trillium Engineering Group, and I actually just switched companies, so forgive the Casco Bay Engineering. I've been at Casco Bay Engineering for probably about 20 years. So that being said, I had previously worked on essentially the Warren Mechanical project. What they had done, probably about 7 years ago, was put an addition, a warehouse addition on the back, which is essentially shown, forgive me, is this, I don't have a pointer in that, but it's essentially shown page up in back of the original building. And we had done parking improvements, and we had also done, at that point, the dumpster location in the rear. And essentially what Warren Mechanical does is they provide heating and cooling for commercial. And of course, in this business climate, they have expanded. They expanded, like I said, 7 years ago, and they're expanding again. So we'd also done the drainage pond at the rear of the property, and we had planned to essentially include a building addition, which is why we're coming in front of you now. And if you can go next slide. So what we have shown is a brand new building, which will be both office and warehouse. And unfortunately, the existing septic is not large enough for both buildings. So we had to add essentially in the front of the building a new septic system. So that's all designed and taken care of. We'd also have to provide new water service to the new building. And unfortunately, there is a moratorium in the existing road on Warren Avenue, but we believe that we can construct this building, and then with the moratorium being up in the fall, we'll be able to connect at that time. Either that, or if we have to make other arrangements with basically trenchless technologies, we can also do that. So we are providing the new building, and we're rerouting the drainage that will be routed to a new basically forebay that will then drain into the existing stormwater system. And we are providing new parking basically to the rear of the building and also to the side of the building. The new building is roughly about forgive me on that, it's roughly about 80 feet by 110 feet. Most of it will be warehouse, but again, there will be some additional office space that will be used in that building. The lighting will be building mounted, similar to the existing building, and it will be cut-off fixtures. And as you can see, we are also providing new landscaping that'll be in the front of the building to meet the landscaping requirements on that. Trucks will be essentially box trucks. We don't need a loading dock, so they'll be able to do forklift loading and unloading, and those doors will be at the rear of the building where we have some of the employee parking that's there. The parking required is 29 total parking spaces for both buildings, and we have 32 parking spaces. We're going to use the existing dumpster since it's essentially the same use for both buildings. And I think that covers just about everything that we're doing. The use stays essentially the same. It's Warren Mechanical that will continue to be the owners. They're just going to use both warehouse spaces and both office spaces as they presently do. So, pretty simple concept. Industrial or commercial building and industrial zone. Thank you. There we go. Just wondered if we had renderings on that. Appreciate that. So The building itself is a single slope building, so the upper left is essentially the view from the driveway as you pull in, and then the upper right is essentially the view from Warren Avenue. So most of the rainwater is not going to shed onto the parking lot, it's going to shed out back, and we have a swale that basically takes that to the drainage forebay and then into the existing detention pond. And then the other views show the overhead door locations for loading and unloading. I think that's about it. I'm happy to take any questions that the board has. I know we are coming up here as first meeting, but we think it's a pretty simple process. The architect, as you can see, has done a great job with this building from our standpoint, and that's it. Open up for questions.
Thank you, Eric. Staff comments?
Don't have much to add to that presentation. We're very appreciative of the applicant continuing to improve the corridor of Warren Ave with the building design that they've chosen, as well as the addition of landscaping along the corridor. We have provided a motion on page 18 of the staff memo, along with the conditions and findings of fact that follow.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to open the public hearing section. Anyone who would like to make a statement or ask a question, please come up to the mic on your right-hand side. Since I see no movement, I close this public hearing. Since there are no questions, you don't need to give me any answers.
Thank you.
Board comments. Nancy?
Yeah, I really like the design of the building. I think on Warren Avenue, that's going to be a really nice look. And I'm not sure if it's just for the purpose of this presentation, but it looks incredibly sparse of landscaping. I think that would be a nice addition. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ed, do you have a comment? Ed, do you have a comment?
No, I don't.
Thank you. I will concur with Nancy. The landscaping is nice, but it's very, very sparse. And I would think, especially in that area, we've already had several buildings and projects come before us with a landscaping plan. So, motion is on page 18. For us to move this forward, we would need a motion.
I have a question before doing a motion.
Sure.
So
Nancy?
would that, if we do the motion, would that include landscaping, or do we add that to the motion?
My gut feeling is that you would add it to the motion. However, let's ask our expert.
If we could maybe just ask the applicant to highlight the additional landscaping that they are proposing in this, just so that it's clear, because sometimes it may not appear quite as clear on the grading plan, where it is functioning sort of as double duty on this particular application, but maybe Eric can provide more comment to
Sure.
that.
Yeah,
Eric,
thank
would you do that, please?
Yeah, thank you about that. I was actually waiting for you guys to finish. So the architectural rendering that we did, we were looking at, doesn't have the landscaping on it. So it was just an architectural rendering. So I apologize about that it didn't have the landscaping included that. But you can see in the site plan here, we've added, it looks like a dozen trees that are exactly on the road buffer that we're talking exactly right there. So we are adding a bunch of landscaping directly in front of the building to give us a little bit of basically some screen between Warren Ave and the building itself. But the building, of course, the mass of the building will be a little bit higher, so you're still going to be able to see the prominence of the building and those overhangs that the architect has essentially accented. So,
What plantage is there in the little garden to your right?
so that was existing landscaping that we had done in the previous application. So when we had done the warehouse expansion, at the driveway entrance, so the last time we came through, we essentially widened the driveway, added in some parking, and yes, exactly, in the front and also to the left of the entrance. So, yes, right in that area. So that's what we had done the first time around, and now we're adding in screening. Of course, we have the septic area on the very left, and then we're adding in screening directly in front of the building, and those are actual trees. So,
And what kind of trees are they?
I believe those are maple trees, and it's listed right there in the planting schedule.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry it wasn't as clear from the rendering on that, so.
I'm glad I asked.
Me too.
I need a motion, please.
So, Mr. Chair, I motion that the site plan application for Warren Mechanical for a plus or minus 8,600 square foot office and warehouse located at 39 Warren Avenue, tax map 046, lot 009, 010, and 010A, Zone Industrial Park District, is approved with conditions, and the following findings of fact, conclusions, and conditions as stated on pages 18 through 21 of the staff memo dated April 30th, 2021, are adopted in support of that approval.
Thank you, Nancy. I need a second, please.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Larry. Moved by Nancy, seconded by Larry. Any comments? Roll call vote.
Nancy Littlecapes,
Yes.
Larry McWilliams.
Yes?
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon,
Yes.
Ed Reedman,
Chair Rebecca Dillon. Yes. Ed Reed.
Yes.
Chair Rainey Daniel.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I need a motion to go into workshop, please.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I need a second, please.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Nancy Littlecapes,
Yes.
Larry McWilliams.
Yes?
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon,
Yes.
Ed Reedman,
Rebecca Dillon. Yes. Ed Reedman.
Yes.
Chair Rainey Daniel.
Yes. We're now in workshop, and Becca, would you be good enough to read this next item into our records?
2021.14 subdivision, 820 Main Street, 820 Main LLC. The applicant is proposing a 6-unit subdivision within the second and third floors of an existing building that is currently occupied by business offices. Tax map 033, lot 124, zone City Center District, Village Review Overlay Zone. Use dwelling, multiple family, existing uses, service business, and restaurant class 1.
Thank you. And who's making the presentation?
Good evening. My name is Evan Carroll. I'm from with Build Architecture and representing 820 LLC tonight. Good evening. Thanks for having me. Mr. Chair and Mr. Reedman, I served on the planning board with you guys back in 2006, 2007. It's been a while, but good to see you.
Welcome back.
I'm actually, let's see. So this project, for those of you who aren't aware, is the building in front of the drive-through coffee shop over down by the Congregational Church. So, yep, that photo is it. And we're looking at that elevation, we're looking at taking the top 2 floors and converting those to 6 residential units. The ground floor would remain, could potentially have the same tenants unless, of course, they change. But the door in the middle between those 2 tenant spaces is one of the access points to the upper floors. This is just looking down the alley. You can see that there's no windows on the first floor except for the old drive-through for the bank, and then you can see the residential windows above. And also looking down this alley, you can see one heat pump unit, and we would potentially be looking to put another heat pump unit or 2 on this side of the building moving forward. That's an item that the staff asked us about. This is the existing survey of the property. When this project is done, this would be the same survey. The only difference is there will be pipes under the ground. So this is the site plan drawing, which basically just includes running the water lines to upgrade the water service, to add sprinklers, and have support the residential units. Maybe more information than you need, but these are the 2 upper floor plans for the 6 units. Each floor has 1 unit across the front on Main Street and then 2 units at the rear. There's this, if we go to the next slide, another staff question was related to access to those units. You can see on the left-hand side of that slide is the first floor without all the tenant walls. You can see the 2 stairs that access the 2nd and 3rd floors. And so that's, the residential units will have their own entrances that are separate from the commercial entrances. That is the extent of my presentation. Another question, as far as the slides go, another question that was raised by staff was related to off-site parking, and my clients are close to having an executed agreement related to having off-site parking, with the hopes that after the garage goes up that there will be closer options to the site, basically. I do have a slide at the very end, which we're in the very preliminary stages as far as locating the exterior heat pump condensers. It's after this page. But these are the potential locations. We'll put as many as we can within the allowed distances underneath the rear overhang. But the allowed distances won't allow them all to be back there, so we'd be looking at putting a couple over the drive as well. And the rest of the questions from staff were comments, were much more administrative, and I don't feel a need to address any of those.
Thank you. Staff comments?
This is exactly the type of redevelopment of the downtown that we were envisioning when the expansion of the downtown housing overlay was implemented to allow for more units to be utilized within existing footprints and in this case, an existing structure. So we are thrilled to see more people living in the downtown because that's what we need right now is more people in our downtown area. This is the sketch plan review process, so we still have some items to address. The applicant is working on getting leased parking so that we are not trying to create any issues in our downtown. The only 2 uses that require parking to be secured are daycares and residential. All other commercial uses in our downtown do not have to have secured parking. We want to make sure that we're not causing issues for snowplow events where we have limited downtown parking currently, that we're not creating situations where we would be having to tow lots of cars. So we want people to have places where that they can store their vehicles safely, understanding that in good weather that they can park in legal spaces that have the durations of time that they're going to be parked there for. So I think with that, I'll hand it over to the board and for their deliberation.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to open the public comment section. Anyone with a question or a comment, please come to the left microphone system and say your name clearly and your address, and nice and loud so our fans in the audience here and at home can hear us. Seeing no movement, I close the public comment section. Since there are no questions from the spectators, let's see if there are any questions from the board. Board questions or comments. Larry?
Yeah, my only comment is about the parking as well, so I'm all happy to put in more apartments. I mean, the office space is good too, and I know we don't need parking for that. But parking for residential, as you know, in the ordinances, we need a spot, so if we can find a place to put the cars safely where people can walk and get back and forth to the residences, that would be my comment and what needs to see. So, thanks.
Thank you, Larry. Anyone else? Nancy?
Yeah, and I support Jenny, the city planner's statement about needing more people downtown, so this is great to see people that live downtown. I'm wondering about toters, trash toters. Would that be 6 trash toters or a dumpster, or can you please address?
Yeah, we currently have a dumpster for the commercial use. You can see that behind the coffee shack. And so the residences will be using that as well. And so there will be no totes.
Okay, thank you.
And can I talk about the parking briefly as well? We're quite certain that the actual parking demand will, depending on how you look at it, be either reduced or more resilient. The parking demand during the day should be reduced because most people leave their residences during the day. And should be reduced overall as well because the offices could easily hold, 10 or 20 people, and it'll just be six one-bedroom residences. The difference is now we'll have some actual spaces allocated for them as opposed to the public parking.
How are you going to handle hiding the dumpster?
It currently has a fence enclosure. The plan is to continue to use that fence enclosure.
I'm trying to remember, is it a new one or is it one that's been there for a long time?
I think it probably falls in the in-between category.
Okay.
It's not as old as some.
Okay. I too have to agree with my fellow representatives, and I firmly agree with Jen, our planner, that the more people we can bring into downtown, the more vibrant our city will be. It's nice to see a plan at the last meeting and a plan again at this meeting. Hopefully there'll be 30 or 40 more meetings with somebody coming to the downtown and building. Any other questions? Any other comments? On your timeline, when are you planning to come back?
We're hoping to be here next month.
Have you got your application in?
We will put it in tomorrow. We basically have, there's almost no changes to the
Just
materials.
be aware that Becker and Jen's dance card is pretty full. They're very, very popular right now.
We've been talking with them about this plan since the beginning, so.
Good, very, very good. Good luck, and I'm glad to see you again, and on the other side. And I'm glad that this is coming forward.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
See you soon.
Perfect.
Becca, can you be good enough to read the next item?
Item 2021.15, Paper Street Development, Deer Hill Circle, JW Group LLC. The applicant is proposing to construct the remainder of the approved 1959 Deer Hill Circle subdivision to include the connection of public streets Deer Hill Circle and Chickadee Lane. The constructed paper street is proposed to provide frontage for the remaining 16 single-family house lots in the Deer Hill Circle subdivision. Tax map 041, lot 084, zone residential growth area 1.
Thank you, Becca. Pretty scary. I was alive and well in 1959. Applicant presentation, Craig Burgess from Sebago Technics.
Thank you. Am I allowed to take off my mask?
No, you're not.
Okay.
Thank you for asking. You're a gentleman.
Good evening. My name's Craig Burgess. I work with Sebago Technics. Tonight I'm here with Josh Waterhouse of JW Group LLC. The project is a 16-lot subdivision on approximately 7.24 acres of vacant wooded land. All 16 lots will be served by the proposed Deer Hill Circle extension and a new second road to be known as Chickadee Lane. The project also involves the development of an existing paper street, which has been on record for quite some time. Deer Hill Park was originally approved, I believe, back in 1959, and this portion of the subdivision was never constructed. The subdivision plan that we submitted proposes almost no changes to what is on public record, so the lots and the right-of-way will remain completely unchanged. Not shown on this plan are sidewalks, street trees, and lighting, which will certainly be part of the final design, and we're hoping to submit sometime around for the January 9th submission deadline. The project will also be served by utility extensions involving sanitary sewer, water, and underground telecommunication, telephone, cable. As you may all be aware, I believe that there's been some developers in the past that have tried to develop this piece of land, similar to what you're seeing here, but ultimately failed short due to some of the high costs associated with a pump station. This project before you tonight is not proposing a pump station. The cost of that is upwards of $500,000. Instead, the applicant is choosing to bring in fill to provide cover over that sanitary sewer to connect to the public system on Deer Hill Circle. That's going to be the biggest design challenge from my standpoint to make that sanitary sewer work, but we believe we can do it. We have performed some preliminary grading evaluations to see how that will work. So there will be fill brought in to the site to provide the cover because the land grades start to slope away from the rest of the subdivision. So you're going to have to kind of go up at a gradual grade to keep that cover over the sanitary sewer pipe. Stormwater drainage infrastructure will also be proposed as part of this project for stormwater treatment and stormwater conveyance. At this time, we believe that more than an acre of new impervious will be created. Therefore, a Maine DEP's Chapter 500 stormwater law permit will be required to address stormwater quality. Stormwater quantity will be addressed through the city's ordinance to evaluate peak rates of runoff during both the pre and the proposed condition. I know that this project, the plan that we originally provided, it was pretty bare, but what we were trying to represent with that plan is that we were proposing almost no changes to what was originally approved back in 1959. The stormwater from the site, pretty much, we're going to be taking a lot of the runoff that comes from the current subdivision and trying to reconvey that through. There's a pretty good-sized ditch that runs southwest and northeast through the site. So we'll be dealing with, as part of our final design, we're going to go through the full analysis to look at stormwater. A wetland delineation has been started, so you probably noticed on the plans that there were wetland lines. That is being completed by Mark Hampton Associates. Mark Hampton Associates has also been on site to evaluate vernal pools. At this time, we believe that there will be no vernal pools on the site. The land grades all pretty much slope around 5 to 4%, in some areas steeper, to the drainage gullies that I had just mentioned. So at this time, we believe there will be no significant environmental considerations. The beginning with habitat maps that are available to view also show no significant plant or wildlife species on this site. As part of the due diligence for this project, we reached out to Maine Natural Areas Program, Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and Maine Historic Commission. We did receive a letter back from the Maine Natural Areas that indicated there are no significant or important botanical species, plant species on this site. With that said, that's about all I have, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have, or I'm aware that there is some public interest, specifically the neighbors on this project, and I'm here to answer any questions that you all may have. We did hold a neighborhood meeting last Tuesday that was attended by approximately 38 abutters. So I tried to be as informative as I could, but I know that there'll be some more questions asked tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff comment?
So the application before the board at this time is a little different than what we have had since I've been here in the last 5 years. This is the first Paper Street development that we have had to review with the ordinance that we have. So this is not a traditional subdivision review. There are components of this that are listed out here that the applicant needs to provide as part of the final application submission. But typical process, which is what I just want to kind of go over right now, is these applications for paper streets are something that the staff can review and ensure that the application is complete, and then just issue to the planning board that under a consent agenda that this item is deemed approvable. With the amount of concerns that we have heard from the Deer Hill neighbors over the years, we felt that that process was not going to incorporate the public comment component that we felt would be necessary. And so we forgoed the staff process of this, and we went right to a planning board process, which is what we are currently going through right now. Again, typically that would be a one-meeting process, but we felt that in this instance it would behoove all of us to have an initial discussion under what we'll call a workshop, and then come back with all of the necessary engineering requirements that are stated in the Paper Street ordinance for the final approval process. So I just wanted to make sure that the process is laid out. It's a little bit different than our typical subdivision process, but just so that that piece is clear. City staff, which includes the city engineer, fire, police, code enforcement, and planning, have sat down with the applicant and have provided him with the comments that you see in this memo, which would then be incorporated into what will be a final submission package to move forward at the next meeting once that package is complete.
Thank you, Jen. Let me review what I've been saying most of this evening. If you want to have a comment, or you have a question, the microphone to your left, and make sure you clearly say your name, your address, and we will compile between Becca, Jen, and I all the questions to ask at the end. Okay? I open this public comment section.
Great height. Good evening. My name is Marjorie Ward. I live at 12 Fairfield Ave. I sent a detailed email to the planning board. Unfortunately, I did not make the deadline because most of us in the existing Deer Hill section heard that this was going to happen was literally a week ago. And I don't, from what I read, that's a pretty short notice. But I would urge the board to please read the email that I sent, and most particularly to look at the 3 videos that I attached. 2 of them are of the significant wetlands. They were provided by a neighbor, Dan Allen, and one is my own that is described in the email. What I'd like to do is just very, very briefly summarize the points in this email. My first point is stormwater runoff. As it now stands, my house is located at the first drain at the top of Fairfield Ave. So it is the drain that gets hit with the first runoff from the existing Deer Hill Circle. It is inadequate as it is. It is during storms and during spring melting, it is a torrent coming down the street, sometimes going out into the middle of the street. The drain that is right by my property line cannot handle the runoff, and as it proceeds down Fairfield, what you end up, especially in a very bad storm, is a pooling at the bottom of it. And there is a drain at the bottom. So this is, my understanding is that this is going to be even more inundated with runoff into a system that already doesn't work. The second thing is, all right, the water and sewer capacity, I think, is already overtaxed, but what the developer proposes, if I have understood this correctly, without the pumping station, is to have a gravity-fed system into the existing system that ultimately goes down Tolman Street. And there are people here, I believe, who live on Tolman who are better able to address the backups that already happen with no extra houses. I'd like to address traffic and noise pollution. While I was sitting here and listening to the other presentations, I noted that the Camp Commercial Real Estate application, which is going to involve heavy-duty trucks, is 1.1 miles from my house. The 39 Warren Ave application is 1.5 miles from my house. So that is going to be increased noise right there. We have increased noise from Rock Row and the Rock Row concerts already. While before the pandemic, the city tried to work with Rock Row. By the end of the season, you could still hear a lot of noise. I could not sit in my backyard. I could not have my windows open in my house. I literally slept with the windows closed, noise machines on, fans on, with 2 pillows over my head. And they still haven't fixed that. So we already have an area that is being just inundated with more and more noise pollution, and this is just going to make it more unlivable. The traffic, as you can see from the plan here, there is not going to be any ingress or egress from Warren. So what we have now, 2 streets that are for ingress and egress, Tolman and Deer Hill Ave, will still continue to be the only 2 streets. If you try to get onto Main Street from those 2 streets, it is getting increasingly harder. Sometimes you have to wait minutes, and what I say is, thank God for the kindness of strangers who stop and let you in. So this is only going to add to our traffic woes. Secondly, in terms of heavy-duty construction dump trucks with, I think, they hold 16 yards of dirt, something along that line. continuously going through a residential neighborhood is going to just be, excuse me, hell on earth. And this brings up the whole question of using fill as opposed to a pumping station. It was rightly pointed out that this was an approved project in 1959, which by my math is 62 years ago. There have been multiple people who have thought they could develop this. It all failed because of the pumping station issue. These developers think that they are going to bring in enough fill to basically create something like a 30-foot wall and stick a road on it, and then stick houses on it. I have personal experience with building on fill in Bar Harbor, Maine. It doesn't work unless you leave the fill to settle for sometimes up to a year or 2 years. Actually, it was a house I inherited. My mother bought this house, had this house constructed, and within 10 years, her basement was so degraded, the back of her house was falling off, that she had to have her house entirely jacked up and the whole basement redone. One of the videos that I have attached to my email shows what happened to my driveway, which was put on fill when an oil energy truck drove onto it. When he left, there was not a driveway. So those are my comments. I think this is a very ill-conceived way of dealing with an expansion, and that the only possible way that this could succeed in the long run, if it's determined that it is even something viable at all, is to have a pumping station because of the overload that's going to go to the existing systems that don't work anyhow. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Someone else?
Good evening. I realize you're just getting into this. My name's John Russell. I live at 13 Fairfield Avenue, right here in Westbrook, up on the hill. I realize you planning board members are just seeing this tonight, beginning. I would like you to make sure that you check the amount of fill that will have to come in to change the topography enough that we can have a gravity-fed sewer down there. And that's really the most important thing, because that's what stopped this production, stopped this development since 1959. It just hasn't been profitable. So in this day and age, when the houses are being sold at 200% more than they used to be, this may be profitable. I don't know. I doubt it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Paul Keefe. I'm with my wife here tonight. We live at 113 Deer Hill Circle. The house on the map up there at the top, the house right next to the proposed development. So I can attest to the water runoff. I live at the bottom of Fairfield. So when she's talking about major runoff at the top, I'm at the bottom. So the manhole cover is out across Tolman from my house. So if I don't go out and keep it clear of ice and snow, all that water runs either down my driveway, in my garage. I've had it flooded. I've had my basement flooded. It just doesn't handle the water. So if I keep the manhole clear, that water will take a right down the proposed street and run off because it runs downhill from there. So if they propose to bring in fill all that water's going to keep continuing to run into my basement. So it doesn't handle the flow now. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else?
Good evening. My name is Pete Collins. I live at 27 Robin Avenue. I'm about 75 feet from that lower drain that he was just talking about, and I can also attest to the fact that it is often clogged. But my concern is not only the gravity feed, but the enormity of this thing. If you look at this, it's astonishing to see. It dwarfs the existing neighborhood. And it feels like in order to put something like this in place, there should be a lot of engineering, a lot of study, to the effect on the existing neighborhoods and to what it's going to do to the land that's already there. So there was a property that was built, and forgive me, I don't know the name of it or the company that did it, probably about 1,200 feet from my house, right on the right-hand side where Deal Hill ends. When they were blasting, it has cracked my foundation. It has sunk in parts of my lawn, cracked the pad of which my garage sits on. And I know this because I'm actively renovating my house and I'm painting it, so I'm aware of every square inch. I'm replacing cedar shingles, I'm painting every square inch of it, I'm doing new landscaping. So when something new pops up, I know. I also lived in Los Angeles for quite some time, and I've experienced a lot of earthquakes. And the blasting that was done there shook my entire house. I could feel it. When we met with the gentleman earlier on at the meeting, I asked, has anyone done any studies to what this is actually going to entail as far as putting in new sewer lines, power lines, irrigation, things like that? Are you going to have to blast? Have you done any studies to see what there is there? I know that we have a radon pump because there's granite everywhere. So I don't think the granite stops at Deer Hill Circle. I'm sure this whole area, there's a lot of rock underneath there. The last thing I need is more cracks to my foundation. Not only that, it just feels like the quality of life is going to be greatly diminished by this. It just saddens me. I have a young family. We moved here. I have a 4-year-old son. We absolutely love Westbrook. We love this neighborhood. And it's just, every time I look at this, it saddens me to see, and pardon me, but it just feels like a money grab. It feels like it's ill-conceived. It feels like it's not planned out. It feels like there's not a lot of math or science that goes into it. A lot of aesthetics, a lot of maybes. I just really hope that you take this into consideration, the quality of life of the people that live there and that are going to live there, because once this is all done, we're going to have to live with the aftermath of what's decided here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think everybody's taller than me. My name is Ann Russell. I live at 13 Fairfield Avenue. My husband John spoke earlier. He's here with me tonight. My neighbors have described very well the concerns that I share with the fill, the runoff, the sewage. A question that I have is related to the vernal pool assessment that was done. From my understanding, the time to assess for protected species that live in vernal pools for this part of southern Maine is the end of April into very early May. That's wood frogs and spotted salamanders. I know from walking my dog through this property for many years that the pools are there. I have seen tadpoles, I have seen egg masses in those pools. I have many ribbon snakes in my garden all summer long, and I know they aren't a protected species, but they are of a special concern in the state of Maine. So I guess my question is about when the vernal pool assessment was done, and what else maybe can be done to assess that, because we have bats, we have lots of wildlife. So that's the concern that I would mention, and I certainly do share all the others that have been mentioned by my husband and my neighbors tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Keefe.
I'm here tonight with my husband, Paul Keith, and like he said, we abut the property at 113 Deer Hill Circle. I agree with everything that my neighbors have said this evening. We are extremely vulnerable in that neighborhood. That parcel of woods that exists is very thin, and we are vulnerable to everything that abuts it. In the 60-plus years that that has not been built, things have changed around it. The marijuana grow facility blows over our neighborhood. The mill no longer does, but we smell marijuana. The tar plant in the summer, we get the smell of asphalt. And on a daily basis, we hear tamping equipment, trucks. We've had pallets burning in our backyard, hopefully with permits. I'm greatly concerned. When my husband and I moved to the neighborhood, Deer Hill, there were beautiful deer every morning that walked the streets. There are barred owls, bats, possum, fox. So much has changed. The habitat has changed with all of the construction around it, and we don't see those beautiful things as much as we used to. Noise has changed a lot since Rock Row. I don't begrudge anybody the opportunity to make money and a living. However, when you look at this plan and you see 16 new proposed houses being built, and then you look at the grave impact to every single one of us who abut that proposal, it's scary. I'm shaking right now, not at the fact that I'm up here speaking to you all. I'm very scared about what this could do to our family and our quality of life, as well as my neighbors. Thank you all for listening to each of us, and I hope you take some of these things into consideration, because as I'm looking at this plan, and if you were to ever do a site walk, when you put a house on that, there's not that much separating us as a buffer to the industrial things that are now along Warren Avenue and the industrial park behind our development. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Old lady forgot something. Though I do have a question for the developer, and that is, I would like to know a detailed plan as to how the developer is going to stabilize for over the long term something like a 30-foot hill of fill brought in. My understanding of how fill needs to be correctly used is that it has to be tamped down every 6-inch lift. If you bring it in, dump it, and just level it, basically in not the very long term, within a couple of years, anything that you put on it is going to crack, separate, lose its plumb lines, et cetera, et cetera. So the developer, at least as far as I can see, wants to use a gravity-fed system instead of a pumping station, wants to build up the area to, like I said, something like 30 feet, to have this gravity system work, and yet you're talking about tamping down basically a hill. And I'd like to know how that's going to be guaranteed to be stabilized so that the whole thing doesn't fall apart. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Someone else?
Hi, Steve Carmichael from 100 Tolman Street.
Well, we've lived there for 25, 27 years now, and over those years, we've had many issues with our sewer system, trying to back up our lines. So I can't imagine adding all these new properties to that system and having it work. I mean, it doesn't really work well now, so adding them on, really, it won't work unless you do some other design. So also, I'd like to speak about the noise factor. The noise factor is getting worse and worse every year. I mean, we hear Warren Avenue a lot. We hear the snow dump, the people that come in early in the morning with the trucks, the backup alarms, the tailgate smashing, with all these new proposed businesses going down on Warren Avenue. We didn't buy on Tolman Street to live in a commercial area. We feel like we're living on Warren Avenue now because all the trees that are getting cut down around the area, we can hear the turnpike a lot now because of new buildings put up for Westbrook. And I know when Rock Row was put up, there was all talk that it would be okay, but it's not okay. When we want to enjoy the summertime out on the porch, we have to go inside, shut the windows, and we can't enjoy our backyard because of Rock Row. So if you put this development in, you're going to be cutting all those trees down. There's no proposal for any sound barrier fencing or anything. We're going to hear that, Warren Avenue, we're going to hear everything. That's going to be turning our lives and everybody else's lives upside down. So, again, we put a lot of time into our residence and we like it there. We don't want to be in an area that we can't stand to be in. So, that's all I have to say. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Carmichael?
Yes.
What was the number on Tolman Street?
100.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Someone else? Usually you have one shot at this.
Okay, I'll be brief.
Excuse me?
I'll be brief.
Sir? Okay.
I'll be super brief. I just want to make sure.
Sir, could you wait a minute so
Oh,
I
I
can say
apologize.
something?
I'm just a little nervous. I apologize.
I'm going to allow it because the younger woman that came in front of you, I allowed.
Okay.
But during a public comment section, you're allowed one shot.
Okay, noted. Thank
Okay,
you. I
thank you.
appreciate you letting me do this. I just want to make sure that whatever ends up happening, if something does happen, that it's based on something that's going to work. You know, it seems like many people have tried it. They've all come to the same conclusion that it needs to be a pumping station. I'm not sure what has changed in 62 years to think that that doesn't need to be. So I would hope that if something does get put into place, that it's not based on speculation, it might work. It needs to be tried and true. It needs to be proven that it will work, based on actual engineering, not landscaping and designers and things like that. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sir, could I have your name?
Yeah, my name is Peter Collins.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patricia Euland, and I'm at 100 Tolman Street. And I echo just about what everything has been shared tonight. I guess one question for me is, why is it in 59 years, with all the other developers that have come before you, and it's been contingent that a pumping station has to be part of this plan, they've been denied the right to make any sort of a financial gain for themselves, but this developer seems to think that they have an exclusion to that specific component. I don't understand why they think they can just blow that off. And I'm sure there have been many before him that have looked at this piece of property and wanted to develop it, maybe as soon after 1959. But because they didn't come up with a pumping station at $500,000, they were denied. So it seems quite questionable why this Sebago Technics thinks that they don't even have to make that consideration, that they can step over everybody else that came before them. Secondly, there is a lot of congestion. in the Deer Hill area. Trying to get out of Deer Hill Ave or Tolman in the afternoon, that traffic can be backed away all the way up to Lowe's. I've seen fender benders, lots of near misses. As others have said, you wait for someone to be kind to let you in or out of the street. And to think that you're going to add 32 more cars from those 16 houses coming in and out of Tolman and Deer Hill Ave, when this already meets the standards of congestion and unsafe, is just questionable. I mean, I don't know why, if this does go forward, why Warren Avenue isn't looked at as the entrance and exit, and this is not tied into Deer Hill. I also was up at the Hanwha and Lewis new apartment units at the top of the hill, and I see that there is a road that circles down behind those that would actually lead right into this. That's another access point that would, off in Lisa Harmon Drive, that would not impact this plan if it goes through as greatly as it definitely will if it does as it's presented. The other thing is, I had also submitted you an email letter, and I guess it came in late because we weren't given a lot of notice. But in that, I mentioned that when you come up Deer Hill Ave, that's an incline, and there's a sharp left and a sharp right. That's, if the trucks try to use that and any of the heavy equipment, it's going to create challenges. So Tolman Street is probably going to be the most direct access they're going to have. And Tolman has probably the highest density of young children living on that street. And the road itself isn't in the greatest condition. So I don't know how it's going to handle the weight of that equipment coming back and forth, but I do think there'll be some issues with it. And the other thing is, we live directly across from Railroad Avenue, which was a development put in, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago. And they tied in their septic into a connection right in front of our home. And numerous times throughout the last several years, we will see the Westbrook Public Works Department there taking that manhole cover off and examining and working or unclogging that line that ties in from Railway Avenue. So if that's the existing line, I would look at the efficiency of that as it currently is and consider if it's really going to be adequate for this big project and tying into it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Linda Boyce. I live at 41 Deer Hill Circle at the top of the neighborhood. I want to take you back to the 1960s when Deer Hill was built. It was a beautiful neighborhood with beautiful custom-built homes, and it still is. In the late 70s and early 80s, when I was in high school, if anyone mentioned Deer Hill, the comment was, "Oh, that's a beautiful neighborhood with beautiful homes." At the neighborhood meeting the other night where we were standing, as I looked around, I could see 8 different homes. All of them were different, not cookie cutter. Beautifully landscaped with mature trees. So it's important, I think, that Westbrook starts looking at what we build for neighborhoods. Personally, I've been very disappointed with the city lately, with the neighborhoods that are being built in Westbrook. They seem to be all starter homes. There's nothing for 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, or 60-year-olds to kind of move up into. And I hate to use the word cookie cutter, but there are a lot of neighborhoods lately that are just cookie cutter. Nothing special with these homes architecturally. I'm really concerned about the fill that the developer wants to haul in. My understanding is that the trees will have to be cut down, that you can't fill up around trees. We have a lot of mature trees in that neighborhood. We're going to lose those beautiful trees. We're going to lose the buffer that we so desperately need with the Warren Avenue businesses. We've really felt that with the Housing Authority. We didn't realize how imposing the two buildings that are being built right now would be on our neighborhood, and especially on the property that my husband and I own. We didn't realize the elevation of those buildings, and we didn't realize the lack of buffering. And we're worried about that with this developer. I'd really like to see photographs of what this developer builds, the types of homes that he's built recently. I urge you to do this too. I urge you to review this proposal very carefully. Consider what we want Westbrook to look like. We deserve neighborhoods that other communities have too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dan Allen, 17 Fairfield Avenue. And I'm going to abut right up to, there'll be a house behind me possibly if this goes through. I agree with what has all been said earlier this evening. A couple of things, the new development, I mean, they put the new apartment housing, the Harnwell housing up in the back there. And when they did that, we went to the meetings and we, John, the neighbors, we voiced our opinions. And they built it, and it looks nice. But they cleared out all the woods, and they literally took the mountain down, what I thought was Deer Hill. They literally took the mountain down out back. So now we're left with this 6 acres that's still heavily wooded. They got a nice drainage system, the Harnwell building, the apartment building, and but these beautiful oak trees blew down because they were protected from all the other trees in the area. Well, now the wind came in and knocked all the trees down. There's a lot of trees laid down out behind my house now. And I did go out I went out there the other day, and they got the drainage for the apartment, for the building, but they did a lot of blasting behind Linda's house for the road, a lot of blasting. They got the notice about it all, and they did that. But it must have rearranged the aquifers, the water running underground, because out behind the house now, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of pooling, a lot of water out there now. And I went out the other day, and you can hear the peepers out there. And the thing that I don't think has been spoken about, and the picture doesn't show, Warren Avenue is industrial, and right behind that, there's a old railroad bed, and behind that railroad bed is the industrial park on Warren Avenue. Messer has built up to the railroad bed with their equipment, and probably that's where the pallets were burning. Noise factor. The snow dump in the winter months, you hear the tailgates thrashing and crashing, and the reversal arms. And the asphalt plant, we went to that meeting about them putting the asphalt plant. Sure enough, there was some beautiful landscaping you requested that was installed, the trees, but at the little neighborhood meeting we had the other day, somebody said, yeah, and I smell from the asphalt plant. And you do. You smell that in the spring, the marijuana. I'm not going to reiterate it all that we heard tonight. Chadwick Bay Ross, huge front-end loader trucks. They sell $300,000 tractors, front-end loaders. They built back up to the railroad bed. And the railroad bed is right there. If you look right behind you, is that property line, the last row of bushes. And there's a speaker to say, we need a mechanic, or there's a phone call, so you hear the loudspeaker in the neighborhood now. And without them trees, boy, it's going to be noisy. And I did hear Rock Row. I heard the concerts. And the moving company, when I went out there, there's a moving company that's out there now, and they've expanded. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're bringing in some fill, and they're pushing it, and it's right up against, Craig, if you've walked the lot, they pushed it right up, so the railroad tracks are here, Warren Avenue, and they just keep on filling. I bet you there's 10 feet of fill right to the property line that's going to abut his development. And that is just squeezing the water in. The water running down from the Harnois apartment is just pushing more water down. And with that all said, so we're getting all this water coming down that everyone's talking about. At the railroad bed, when I go hiking, walking through there, there's a beautiful blue rock, granite, beautiful granite tunnel, drainage. It goes under the railroad bed they built way back in the 50s. And it was plugged up early this spring. And the water was backing up in the trenches. I removed the debris and the water went rushing through. Craig mentioned there's a huge culvert that we're going to work with. And that's a good idea, but I'm telling you what, that water's all going where? Over to the Warren Avenue, and they already had a landslide into the river a year ago or something like that. There's a lot of water out there, a lot of water. As far as the sewer goes, you heard enough about that tonight. But yeah, I have a couple notes here. I put down the mudslide that happened into the Presumpscot River. And I'm trying to think, CMP, it was nice enough. Craig got the neighborhood together there and spoke of his plans. And one guy, an elderly gentleman who works for the water district, and he told me, he told all of us that the septic system was subpar, because he's down in the corner there. Well, I'd never experienced subpar sewerage, but he does, and he worked for the water districts. That's something they want to look into. And power outages, for sure. I mean, I sit right there in Deer Hill, we're on Fairfield, we lose power often, and they go right down to Dairy Queen and hit the circuit breaker, it's back on. I thought it was all from the Dairy Queen, cooking the burgers or something, but it's not. But, so that's a CMP issue that, there's gonna be a lot of issues that are gonna have to get addressed. But there's a lot of water running out. They haven't, I don't think any of you folks have waited. It hasn't been a year. They're just finishing the apartments on the Harnois apartment buildings. You should see the water out back. I mean, you have to put your muck boots on to get out, walk through there. And that railroad bed, the water going under it, and out behind Priscilla's house, there's a 15-foot gully where these two streams come together. It gets bigger and bigger of a river, and underneath the granite tunnel. I don't know how they're going to get rid of that. I don't know if they're going to just fill that in or put a big drainage pipe there, but it's all going to push that clay over on Warren Avenue. It's going to excite that ground, And with that said, 20 some odd years ago when I moved in there, I went to work at the Jetport, and I told people I bought it in Deer Hill, and they all said, Deer Hill? I'm like, yeah, over there across from Dairy Queen. Deer Hill neighborhood was a nice neighborhood, and lo and behold, I scored, man. What a beautiful neighborhood. The neighbors are just as beautiful as the neighborhood. Great place. I don't see how, with all the trees gone, if you all take a look, all that light green right now is all trees. Beautiful oak trees, all trees. They take that down, how you gonna get a house in there? And I mean, people will pay stupid money for a house, but up against that industrial zone and all the water running, I think there's gonna be a lot of issues. And I would, Craig, you can address that to Josh. You know, I met the builder out there this winter. There was a foot of snow on the ground, and the migrant, homeless person was building a house out, a tent out back, and I was keeping an eye on it. I always kept an eye on the property for Mrs. Wayne, who was the prior owner. And there was a guy starting to move in out there, and I went out, and it wasn't him, it was the guy that's looking to buy the property, Josh. And I told Josh a few things about it, you know. And he told me he was a builder from down south, and you know, we'll see what becomes of it all. But he's a younger guy, and I just want him to be aware of, you know, sometimes you don't, you know, this looks good, 16 houses, let's pop some houses in there. But there's a lot of residual effects. If you haven't heard enough of them tonight, and enough from me, I'm just giving you a heads up about it. So, that's all on my list. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? I close the public comment section. You ready?
Would you like me to?
Let's set up, no, we wrote the questions down. If we miss any, you can jump in and give an answer. Let's start off with drainage.
So where this site is, it's located, the land slopes away from the rest of the subdivision. So stormwater will be directed away from the subdivision. And yeah, we'll have to size the pipes to accommodate all that drainage coming from the subdivision. I am aware of the one big gully that takes a lot of water. So that will be looked at as part of our final design. And this does require a lot of work, a lot of civil engineering work to go through that process and do the full stormwater analysis. And we have every intention of providing that as part of our next final design application. But like I said, the majority of that, and I haven't got into the detailed plans of the stormwater yet, but just walking the site there, it does accept a large portion of the Deer Hill Park subdivision.
Traffic.
Traffic, the traffic engineer with Sebago Technics sent Jenny, the planner, a traffic memo this afternoon. During the weekday, the traffic will result in 16 peak hour trips in the AM and 12 peak hour trips in the PM. And then on Saturday, it will result in 15 peak hour trips. So it's typical of a 16-lot single-family residential subdivision.
Okay. Flooding, which is not necessarily the same thing as water, but that's basically in the springtime or after a large storm.
At this time, I anticipate that 2 or 3 under-drained soil filters will be required to handle runoff from the subdivision. And that will address the flooding concerns. That will help detain the water, slow it down a little bit. And what an under-drained soil filter is, it's not a pond that always has water. It's designed to drain within 24 to 36 hours. So that slow release of runoff it provides the detention so that there's not one big gush of water to that culvert that crosses the railroad.
Storage.
Fill or storage?
No, storage.
It's never an ideal solution to have a pump station for the sanitary sewer flow. Not only is it a substantial upfront cost, $500,000 to $600,000 for Josh, But it's also at that point when the city takes it over, it's an ongoing maintenance issue. So we really want to create a passive solution with a gravity system here. And yet it requires a little bit of fill be brought into to the site to maintain the proper amount of cover over the sanitary sewer pipe, which is 4 feet of cover. So the fill brought into the site will not be 30 feet high. My preliminary grading assessment that I looked at, it shows that it's going to be around 6 to 8 feet at a very limited area of the site. But for the most part, it's going to range between 2 and 4 feet above existing grade to get that cover over the sanitary sewer pipe.
How much fill is going to be required for when you get to this stage of building homes?
The preliminary grading assessments we've done, it's about 25,000 cubic yards. And that involves some for tapering out the fill slopes into the single-family residential lots. And again, that's very preliminary still at this point. I haven't got into the full design yet.
Okay. The noise factor, and let's break that up into 2 folds, okay? The Warren Avenue and the Main Street and Rockwell Concert and the Main Turnpike has nothing to do with you, okay? Let's just talk about the noise factor, number 1, in the construction part. Number 2, how much increase in noise will 16 homes create?
16 homes once fully developed, it's really, it doesn't create, it's not a substantial, significant noise. It's really during the construction. And usually that is managed through an approved construction window, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then minimizing the amount of backup alarms and things of that nature. As far as protecting the neighborhood from some of the exterior development, we'll do our best to maintain vegetated buffering, natural buffering along the perimeter, and then along the lots that are immediately adjacent to this project.
Okay. Vernal pools.
Vernal pool assessment is ongoing. We've actually had Mark Hampton Associates out there over the last 2 weeks, and I believe he's doing a final visit this week. So he has looked at this project within that limited window.
Okay. Blasting.
Blasting, Josh and other contractors, subcontractors at the site will be restricted by the local ordinance when it comes to blasting. We anticipate doing test pits out there as part of the stormwater design. DEP and the city require test pits to look at the underlying soils where under-drained soil filters and other best management practices are proposed. So we will be doing test pits as part of that. But as far as blasting, the roadway itself will be constructed primarily in fill. So any blasting that would be required, if any, would be really for the construction of the homes. And at that point, they'll adhere to the local standards.
Okay. Size of homes.
The intention of Josh is to maintain the character of the existing neighborhood. He doesn't want to go and create something that is totally off the wall and is different than what's out there now. So he has the full intention of not doing cookie cutter homes, but doing a variety of different homes to appeal to the many different age groups.
Number of bedrooms.
I believe 3 to 4 bedrooms.
So you're talking larger homes.
Yeah.
And predicted price range.
That hasn't been vetted out yet, but we anticipate as part of the final design package providing a section, and I'm sure it's required in the ordinance, for the technical ability of both Sebago Technics and JW Group. And as part of that, we'll include a description of some of the prior projects that JW Group has worked on and the style homes that are anticipated for this subdivision.
And all the roads will be built on city standards?
Yes.
And there'll be sidewalks with granite curbing?
Yes.
And there'll be tree plantings?
2 per lot.
Becca, have I forgotten anything? Jen, have I forgotten anything?
Nope, I think you did a great job.
If you can just speak to why that there is no feasible way to connect this subdivision with any other road system, just from a diffusion standpoint, just to speak to grading?
Yeah, JW Group just doesn't really have the rights to just go across somebody else's property to look at possible connection into other public roadways. We're really trying to maintain the paper street that is on record for this project. We just don't have the rights to go and connect to another roadway, just because if you look at this, you're limited by the railroad on one side, and then the land to the east just isn't under the same ownership. And there is no roadway within reach in that area.
Your timeline?
JW Group plans to start construction once we get both local and state approval.
It's too vague. Timeline?
Hopefully this fall.
You've heard all the concerns. Shortly, the staff will be asked to make a comment, and we, the planning board, will be also adding to your list. Okay. Is this your first project in Westbrook?
No, it's not.
Okay, good. Because you know what our standards are. Okay. And we follow all the rules, and there is no skipping. Okay.
We will put together a very thorough application and plan set.
Good. And be aware, check it once, check it twice, just like Santa, and make sure that all the questions that have been asked, some vague, some very, very focused, you are able to answer them all, because they'll all be invited back, because they are part of this process. And we're going to go through at least one more of these, and we'll see what happens, okay? Now let me go to the board comments. And Madam Vice Chair.
Okay. So I guess my first question is for staff. So this is an already approved site plan?
This is already an approved subdivision.
Subdivision,
Yes.
okay. Has anything changed from the already approved subdivision? Was that also a 16 lot?
So the lines that you see on the lot delineations, that is what was approved of back in '59.
Okay. Thank you. Craig, can you talk a little bit more about, I understand that the idea is to add fill so that you can connect to the sewer, and I know you've mentioned 6 to 8 feet in certain areas, maybe 2 to 4 feet in other areas. I'm having a hard time envisioning how that's going to relate to the existing lots around it, for example, because I don't live far from this neighborhood and I walk or run through here quite often, actually. And like the homes on Fairfield Avenue, how will that transition to the lots, lot 1, 2, 3, and 4, if you're elevating those? And then how will lot 5 transition to that neighboring existing home? I'm just having a hard time envisioning that because I don't want it to look. The homes are situated in that neighborhood very nicely with the grade. And I know that it slopes down towards, I think it was the Keefe's home. You know, it's high and then it goes down low. But it still looks very natural. I don't want this I've seen subdivisions done and they don't look natural. They're, you know, the grade is very steep when it's hitting someone else's property line. And I just want to understand that better, what the thought is. I understand you haven't completely vetted through all the details, but I think that's going to be important.
We really want to keep it looking as natural as possible. And the grades, as you go from north to south, the grades go up quite a bit. So I'm thinking right now, we haven't got into the design, but the fill would be tapered back into the grade, so it doesn't look like the road stands out as much. The 8 feet of fill actually has nothing to do with the sanitary sewer. It's trying to meet the city's slope standard, maximum slope standard of 8%. So when you're on the southern side of Deer Hill Circle and you're driving north, that's about a 15% slope plus or minus, maybe even more. So when we have an 8% slope, that 8 feet of fill is trying to match into the lower portion of the extension. So we'll do our best to spread that fill out as much as we can so it doesn't look so out of place. We understand that fill will have to be brought onto some of the lots, especially the ones to the north, to create cover over the sanitary sewer lateral that connects into the main. So I would anticipate at the back of those lots, they're going to have walkout basements. We'll explore that so that we can minimize the amount of fill behind the homes.
Okay, and it sounded like the back 4 lots will have their own pumps. Is that?
Yeah, those will have individual pump systems that will pump up into a sanitary sewer manhole, and at that point it will be all gravity.
Okay. And where this project isn't required to have a traffic study?
Not for the level of 16 single-family homes, no.
Okay.
We have, as part of this, we have a letter from Sebago Technic's Derek Caldwell, who is a traffic engineer, that we have for our record to be able to document that.
Okay. Okay, I think just as we move forward through the process, being able to understand how those grades are going to work better will be helpful, maybe even some site sections, just to really understand that. And do you see any need for retaining walls as part of the project to help transition?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other board members? Larry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also am concerned with the water runoff, the fill. I see with the neighbors they're very well concerned. One thing I do appreciate the builder coming in is with single-family homes. I know we do have a lot of these cookie-cutter duplexes, so forth, rentals coming in, and I definitely encourage the growth potential, especially for our taxes, to stay in line, is to put the single-family units in. I think they encourage more people to buy and protect the neighborhoods versus a rental units that come in to maybe disrupt a neighborhood as it is. So you guys are going to have a lot of work to do with the engineering and, you know, the process and so forth, and, you know, we'll just have to see how it goes step by step.
Yeah, all 16 lots will be single-family residential. The density on this parcel actually allows for 52 units, but we are not going there. We're keeping it to be exactly aligned with the Paper Street development that's on record.
Thank you.
Nancy?
Yeah, a couple comments here. One is how much I appreciate all the people that have come out to speak tonight, because I feel like when the public comes in, asks questions, and poses concerns, it gives the chance to hear the responses back at that moment. And as a board member, I really appreciate getting to hear the responses and the concerns. This is residential growth area 1, and can we get a reminder of what that is, the definition of residential growth area 1? Don't mean to put you on the spot, Jenny.
Just have to find it. So the definition under the purpose statement of residential growth area 1 is to provide urban core community densities to support the downtown center. Reduced setbacks will permit the infill of vacant properties in areas that are already served by municipal infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate when the community comes forth and talks about the value of the natural lands, and it seems to be, it's a tough thing because we're at a place as a city to be growing, and we've got these various definitions of how to grow parts of our city, so thank you for reading that.
Mr. Reedman, do you have any comments, questions?
Mr. Reedman, do you have any comments, questions? Mr. Reedman, do you have any comments, questions? Mr. Reedman, do you have any comments, questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anything else we should cover?
So as far as your expectation of submitting for the, are you submitting for the June deadline to get to the July meeting, or was it, is that your intention?
Yeah, it is. At this time, we're going to start to really dive into the design. After this meeting, we were just waiting to hear what the feedback was so that we were going the right direction.
So the June deadline is June 10th, and the July meeting would be July 6th.
And as I said in the last 2 meetings, Becca and Jen's dance cards filling up awfully fast. Okay, so keep that in mind. You're off the hook right now. I'm going to go to Jenny, though. I'll go Jenny on the spot. Several times tonight, residents have said that 1 week is short notice. What is the usual time to notify a neighborhood that a meeting is coming forward, and what was the date that information was sent out? Please.
Typically, we try to send notices out about 2 weeks ahead of time. These notices were put in the mail on April 20th, so they would have gone out the 21st and should have been received around the 22nd or 23rd. These would have been postcard notices, which is different than the letter that you would have received for the neighborhood notice.
Okay, awesome. And this process is not short, it's long. This is only the very first step that we, with you, are beginning this journey. And you will all be involved in the journey as well as we will all be involved in the journey. Okay? And I want to thank all of you for coming, taking your time. And for those of you who are not as old as I am, nap time's coming real quick. So thank you very, very much for coming. Hope to see you next time, and the time after that, and the time after that. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Can you read the next item into the minutes?
Are we ready for the next item? Sorry. Item 2021.16, referral from City Council. This is an amendment to the Land Use Ordinance, Section 335-1.8 definitions. New Section 335-2.29.1 Solar Energy System, Article 5 Zoning Districts, Section 335, Attachment 1, Table 1, Land Use Table. The proposed amendment establishes a solar energy system ordinance. The intent of the ordinance is to define residential, commercial, and accessory solar energy system uses, establish performance standards, and determine appropriate districts for each use throughout the community.
Thank you. And the staff presenter is going to be Jenny, and just to let you know, a number of us have been very, very excited ever since we heard you were venturing down this road. So we are anticipating all the information you can give us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, and I'll try to be brief, understanding the hour. As we had alluded to during a couple of our previous discussions, solar energy systems have been a discussion within our community to try to create this land use. As right now, our current vehicle of allowing these has been through the manufacturing district to say that it is manufacturing electricity, or in the instance of the last couple that you have seen are municipal facilities, because they are generating power to offset the municipal energy load that the community has for all of its municipal buildings. That utilization of use category is not how we want to proceed, and we want to have these solidified within the ordinance, along with the necessary performance standards that will provide us with the conditions that you want to have these in to ensure that they're not going to create any issues for the land or for any adjacent property owners. So when we were trying to look at definitions, Becca did a ton of research across the state to determine what other communities are using for terminology, how that they're regulating them, what are the standards. We finally settled upon the term solar energy system as the term, and then we looked at what are the actual types that we're trying to regulate. We need to have categories because we didn't want to blanketly put these into every zone. And the reason why we didn't want to allow these in every zone is from purposes of taxation. For the utilization of land for a ground-mounted solar system, the utilization of land, we want to make sure that we're putting these in areas that we're not taking up high-value land that would otherwise be for, say, another Abbott or an IDEX that brings in an enormous tax benefit to this community, and we don't want to take those lands that are otherwise very important and close to infrastructure and highway systems in our commercial areas. And so that was a high priority for us when we were trying to look at where we should be locating these elements within the community. We came to three terms, which were commercial, and a commercial system is one that is using solar energy and trying to sell it off into the system. So it's a straight, we're putting these systems in so that we can sell our power. The next category was accessory commercial, and that is to allow those existing businesses that want to offset their own energy to be able to do so, and do it under a slightly less stringent platform than, say, somebody who's in a straight commercial category. And then we have the residential component, which would be for anybody who has a home that wants to offset their own energy output for their system, is to place solar panels either on their house or on the ground. So those were our initial three categories that we were using for the purposes of creating uses. If you want to skip to page 3 of the memo, that shows you where we were looking to place and permit the various uses within the community. So Anywhere where we have residential uses, whether or not it is a residential district or whether it is a commercial district that there are existing residential homes in that are non-conforming uses, those existing residences should be afforded the ability to put solar panels on their homes to offset their energy bills. So it's a straight permitted across the board for any resident in the community. So we wanted to make sure that that was established. On the accessory commercial was any business that wants to offset their own consumption of energy. Again, if there's any business in the community that wants to do it, anybody should be allowed to do it, so therefore it is shown as permitted across the board in every district. The solar energy systems, oops, that was a little mistake right there, that are strictly commercial based. So the purpose of these systems is that they are generating power to be put into the grid. We looked at having these located in our residential and rural areas for the purposes of that they are slightly off of the main corridors, and that they are not the high taxable value lands that otherwise would help offset the overall tax base of the community. Just for an example, Brook Road. Brook Road is an RGA2 district. There are substantive parcels of land that are out in the RGA2 district that are off of the main thoroughfares, that these types of operations would be well suited to utilize, and would not necessarily be taking lands that otherwise would provide high taxable base for the community. So that's where we're showing that the commercial systems are looking to be proposed in the RGA1, RGA2, RGA3, and the rural district. In looking at the provisions for how we were going to regulate them, building mounted solar energy systems have very little regulation. That's where we want them. We want them to be on existing buildings where, we want to promote that. So we have very few standards, just more like you still have to comply with height of the district, and that you can't go over the edge of an existing building. So in a residential structure, you can't extend these over the edge of the existing building. You need to stay with the roof line. But that we wanted to make sure that we were trying to encourage the utilization as much as possible on existing structures. When you look into the ground mounted, there are some more regulations as it pertains to the ground, for us to make sure that we're not having any sort of adverse impact on the ground or drainage associated with a very large solar array. So those are things that we would look at to make sure that from more of a site plan component, which is one of the items as it's discussed within the provisions, is that if we have a solar array of more than 3,000 square feet, that those arrays will come to the planning board for review and approval to make sure that the array is not going to cause any sort of adverse impact on any adjacent parcel. And 3,000 square feet is the standard by which that we have all of our site plan approvals to as well. So we're just using the exact same square footage standards for when somebody would actually trigger that level of a review. Under that review would go to code enforcement. And we would also be reviewing those as well to assist the code enforcement officer. So I'll stop there. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, Becca?
No, I think you covered everything. I was able to pull up a map if you still wanted for any illustrative purposes.
You might want to just put it on and then we can answer questions as it relates to some of our choices of where we were looking. But we'd love to hear your feedback on the matter. Again, looking at the areas that would be commercially based to be allowed in the community, you've got the green RD zone, you've got the yellow RGA2, you've got the orange RGA3, you've got the tan RGA1 that is very limited in where there could be probably large-scale arrays, but there could be some smaller scale that could be placed into some of these locations. And then we have two pockets. We have an RGA2 pocket on Saco and an RD pocket on Stroudwater Street. If those pocketed areas are along major corridors, we do have a setback that we are trying to have those arrays set back from the roadway to address glare, but also to potentially afford the property to have sort of a dual use. Is that it doesn't necessarily all have to be an array, is if it's set back enough, there's a potential that maybe there's a business that could go out front and utilize a portion of those lands as well. So with that, I'd love to hear any comments that the board has for us.
I guess I can start. I have a quick question on, say, like, if somebody wants to come in on a commercial account, say in a rural district or in, you know, a heavily wooded lot, would we allow somebody to come in and clear cut to put in a solar array of energy? Or are we looking for trying to use some of these lands that maybe are already been fields, like an old farm, or we're not thinking of coming into a rural district and say, all right, we'll just buy a big chunk of land off Methodist Road and cut all the trees down and put a solar array? Is that something that you're thinking about possibly? I mean, I like the idea of being able to put it on any type of business. I like the fact that you can put it on any type of house. If an individual homeowner wants to sublet their energy and use it, I feel that's a great tool, and we should have been doing that from day one, I think, since solar energy's come around. And I definitely support that idea. But I'm curious and concerned that, say, if one of these big solar places wants to come in, which they do have a lot of money, buy the land, clear cut, and then put these arrays, I don't know if that's something I would be willing to back as far as keeping our rural districts rural.
So that is a concern. That's an absolute concern and a great question. And it's something that I think that the board really should think about, because that is an absolute possibility. So Becca and I struggled with how to place these appropriately, but still understanding that sensitivity. And so that is a real concern, and I don't discount that could happen if it was allowed to go through as it currently stands. Okay. I don't know if that there would be a provision to limit the size of one in a certain district. I'm not sure that we saw any of those types.
There were some communities that regulated based on size. If we had some kind of size regulation in there, we could determine that certain solar arrays in excess of X square feet or wattage generated were only permitted in certain districts. One additional point, though, is that they would still have to meet the standards of development, and so they would need to have access off of a roadway, which is still possible, absolutely, with land accumulation, but that would be necessary for some of the back lots in the rural district, such as these back here. They wouldn't be able to just go in there without access for emergency vehicles or the rare maintenance that is required for these.
So we have been approached by a number of entities across the community about solar. One of them is the Portland Water District land, And Becca, can you put your cursor over that little pond area you were just over? Pat?
right here?
Right there. That's the Portland Water District land. So they have come in the past to ask us the question. They would like to do something, sort of a dual use on their parcel. It's, I believe there's a tank on that parcel currently. So they'd like to do something else with it, and they have mentioned solar. Whether or not that's, again, something that the board wants to consider, whether the land's already cleared, like in the instance of a farm field, or if it's a tree canopy, if that's a concern. We want to make sure that we can write these to be enforceable and defendable.
Yeah, that's just one of my biggest concerns, because I know a lot of these companies are out there now, and they're really pushing to buy and get into it because of the stipulations on what the state of Maine has put into play, especially with CMP and trying to get this energy just straightened out in a sense. So I'm concerned that somebody from a big out-of-state company would just come in and purchase this land up, and then next thing you know, we're looking at all of our rural areas that are there going into fields, and that just concerns me. That's one of the main things. Like I said, with the houses, the businesses, hats off. That's a great idea. My big concern is going in and clear cutting with some of these bigger companies that are out there. So.
Anyone else?
Yeah, that's a good point, Larry. I guess, couldn't they do that now? So this is probably a good time to have language put in here to sort of protect that. Whether it is
They could clear cut now, there's nothing restricting that, but they wouldn't be able to install a solar array at this time in the rural districts.
So in those districts they couldn't, but in others they could, none at all.
The only district that they could go in right now is the manufacturing district, because it's classified under light manufacturing.
Okay, then yeah, it definitely would make sense to think about that. My question was on the building-mounted solar energy system, where it says building-mounted solar energy system shall be subject to the maximum height regulations. So say the building height is 35 feet, would the solar panels have to be under that 35 feet? Is that the intent? I don't agree with that. Just because I do a lot of projects where we put solar panels on the roof and nowhere else is the solar panel considered part of the building height that I've encountered. Because you want your building height to be for your to create your living space, and the solar panel, who cares? It's like a mechanical equipment. You can have mechanical equipment above your building height typically.
So I'm just remembering another definition for like antennas and chimneys. I think when I was in Biddeford, that there was a provision that you were allowed to be X amount over the roof line. It said you couldn't be any more than X square and X feet over the roof line. Is that something that we would want to consider? Just trying to, I know that there's probably, slim to, nil chance that we're talking about somebody's going to put a solar array that's going to stick 20 feet in the air, because that's not how they work.
Yeah, it's not physically possible.
Yes. Is there any concern? I guess that was more our concern, was just, are we being overly restrictive in that statement? Should there be no statement to the height? I guess that's where we would like feedback on.
How does our ordinance address mechanical equipment? Like, what's the definition of building height? Because some places it's the top of the cornice, some places it's half the slope, depending on if it's a flat or sloped roof, and then, but then there's some municipalities have they have clear language in there that it will say any mechanical equipment, elevator, you know, sometimes your elevator shaft bumps up.
So our definition of height of structure is the vertical distance measured from the average ground elevation at the base of a structure to average height of the highest roof surface.
So this language actually isn't compatible with that definition.
Yep. So we can adjust that.
Okay.
Now, are you all done?
I am all done, thank you.
How would most of our downtown buildings work with that? Would everything we have in the downtown building that is high enough over the tree line could fall into that?
So in our downtown, we actually don't have a height restriction. We have it, it's negotiable with the planning board, which is a lovely standard.
Yes. So if say hypothetically, I and Joe Doe purchased Sacramento Park, which will never happen, and build a 7-story building. Could I put a pitched roof with solar panels?
Yes.
And use it towards the energy in my building?
Yes.
Or if I put a flat roof on, could I put them on top of the flat roof and do the same thing?
Yes.
See, I see a huge benefit in the downtown area, especially with some of the buildings that are already built. The rooming house right next to Sacramento Park, that's high enough. Dana Watt Mill is high enough. The Maine Health Systems building would be high enough. So there are buildings that could very, very easily do this, and in the long run, save them money. So, I think that's, and most people with higher buildings would not notice if there's anything on top of them. Okay, yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Ed, do you have any comments?
Ed, do you have any comments?
Yeah. Procedural. You got me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay. There's a provision in the ordinances that require that when council refers something to the planning board can send back a recommendation to them, but they do not have to act on what the planning board says. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Anything else? Do you have enough to move forward?
Yeah, so we'll do a little bit more thinking about the rural district, and and what we could try to bring back to you. And this might evolve over, this might be a couple more meetings to just sort of like kick this back and forth. We don't want to rush this right back to the city council, but we do know that there are people who are anxious to get going, so we do want to try to be as responsive as we can.
And I certainly would not be opposed if you came to several meetings with the same topic and kept adding to it.
Yep.
That would be fine with me. I would assume. I see Ned's head nodding.
Yep.
So, yeah.
If any of the board members have any comments outside of what was just stated here tonight that you wanted to email us, please feel free to do so. And then we can put that together for our next meeting to try to come back to you with some recommendations. And if we think we're in a good spot, we can move it to city council. If we think we need to look at it one more time, then we'll look at it one more time.
Okay.
Great.
Sounds good.
That sounds good with me. I would entertain a motion to come out of workshop and to adjourn in the same motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I need a second.
I second.
Moved by Madam Vice Chair, seconded by Nancy. Roll call vote, please.
Nancy Littrocapes?
Yes.
Larry McWilliams?
Yes.
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon?
Yes.
Ed Reedman?
Vice Chair Rebecca Dillon?
Yes.
Ed Reedman?
Yes.
Chair Rainey Daniel?
Yes. Let the record show that it was unanimous. Thank you, board members. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and have a good, safe week, and see you in 2 weeks.